Councilmember Tapia.
Present.
Councilmember Stolberg.
Here.
Councilmember Stone.
Here.
Councilmember Bloomberg.
Here.
Councilmember Holloman. Absent. Councilmember Littwer.
Here.
Mayor Rotering.
Here, we have a quorum. Everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular city council meeting held September 12th, 2022 and September 27th, 2022?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. May I have a motion to approve the warrant list?
Second.
Any comments or questions on the warrant list? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the vote?
Councilmember Tapia.
Aye.
Councilmember Stolberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Stone.
Aye.
Councilmember Bloomberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Holloman. Councilmember Littwer.
Aye.
Mayor Rotering.
Aye, 6 ayes, no nays, and the warrant list is approved. We'll continue on to the report of the mayor. I have no appointments this evening. I have no proclamations this evening. I do want to share, though, that yesterday, October 10th, was World Mental Health Day. World Mental Health Day is an international day for global mental health education, awareness, and advocacy against social stigma. It was first celebrated in 1992 at the initiative of the World Federation for Mental Health, a global mental health organization with members and contacts in more than 150 countries. As a reminder, each and every day, we need to seize the opportunity for all of us to embrace our sense of community and normalize mental health care. It is okay to not be okay and to ask for help when you need it. Perhaps you've been thinking and talking about the importance of caring for our mental health more lately. I know I have. We are fortunate to live in an area where resources are easily accessible and neighbors care for one another. If you or someone you know is struggling with emotional health, know that resources and support are available. Professionals from our community and beyond are here to help. You can call 211 or text 898-211 to be immediately connected with a trained navigator who can help you access services. If you prefer an in-person appointment, those are available via Family Service of Lake County or at the Highwood Public Library and Community Center. 211 is free, confidential, multilingual, and available 24/7. Please continue to look out for yourselves and for others. I am so pleased tonight to share an update regarding Open Lands Lakeshore Preserve. As many of you may know, Open Lands is a nonprofit conservation organization and accredited land trust. The privately owned nature preserve was once part of the former Fort Sheridan military base. It was restored and repurposed by Open Lands, offering popular walking trails and artworks to the public since 2011. Councilmember Kim Stone, City Manager Gita Newkirk, Deputy Chief Bondaguidi, and I, along with representatives from Naval Station Great Lakes, Open Lands, and Lake County, have been meeting regularly to discuss actions and initiatives to reopen public access to Open Lands Lakeshore Preserve. Last week, Open Lands issued the following update. Quote, this summer, Open Lands received a substantial amount of valuable information from the Navy about Open Lands Lakeshore Preserve. The information is currently under review and being utilized for the creation of a site reopening plan. Recommendations include signage and public awareness training. During this process, the Navy continues to respond in a timely and collaborative way to Open Lands inquiries and requests. Once finalized, documents related to the investigation will be released to the public and housed at a local public repository. Part of the former Fort Sheridan Army base for more than 100 years, the Nature Preserve opened to the public in 2011 under the ownership and management of Open Lands, as I mentioned, a private nonprofit organization. As you might recall, in the first week of April 2021, so over a year ago, the preserve was forced to close for the safety of all due to the discovery and disposal of 3 explosives, a grenade, and 2 flares. These items were safely disposed of by the Waukegan Bomb Squad. Open Lands and the Navy both desire to implement a timely and safe reopening of the preserve. With steep bluffs and ravines, the site has been complicated to investigate and has a long history of various military training uses. The city will continue to remain in close contact with Open Lands as work continues to progress towards safely reopening this beautiful property to public access. So thank you to the public for your patience. We are doing this out of caution to protect the public's safety. Lastly, I don't need to tell you there's a chill in the air and Halloween is right around the corner. There are a number of fun events planned later this month. Kids may trick or treat during official hours on Halloween, the 31st of October, 3:30 till 7. If you're home, we'll be welcoming trick or treaters. Please be sure to turn on your porch or outside light and teach your little ones to trick or treat only at participating households. Visit enjoyhighlandpark.com/Halloween for more fun Halloween activities over the next few weeks, including trick-or-treating at downtown Highland Park businesses and the Ravinia District Candy Stroll. Note that in your calendars. Thank you. That is it for the report of the mayor. Next up on our agenda is business from city staff.
Good evening. We want to begin with a brief recap from the following up on the committee of the whole meeting from September 27th, the discussion regarding the temporary memorials. So based on extensive feedback from the families of victims, community members, and expert input, the city recognized the need to consider the impact of the temporary art installation and the temporary memorial on the mental health of the community individually and collectively. After reviewing the recommendations from staff, listening to the public, and discussing the need to do no harm, the City Council expressed support for separating the temporary memorial and the art installation. They further supported relocating the temporary memorial to the Rose Garden, adjacent to City Hall at 1707 St. John's Avenue, at a date to be determined. So I want to give you a little update of what we've been working on since that date. So since the 9/27 meeting, staff has been in touch with the Park District, the archivist, next of kin of the victims, government and resource partners, and the artist regarding next steps in the process. In relation to the artist, city staff has also provided the artist the date of 10/17 to address the art installation, and have also provided information on how to set up a pop-up business, as well as information on a variety of potential sites based on the information for 2 different concepts the artist may pursue moving forward to continue her community art action piece. A majority of the deinstallation of the artwork at the southwest corner of St. John's and Central took place over this past weekend. The memorial elements, including the portrait altars, candles, and flowers, will remain in place at this location through November 3rd, at which time they will also be relocated to the library for the archivist to review and offered to victim families. On November 3rd, a plaque will be placed denoting the names of all those of the lives of those taken on 7/4, and indicating a temporary memorial in their honor is now located at the Rose Garden. Mental health providers will be on site during peak hours at this location on 11/3. And prior to the date on 10/18, all remaining art installation-related items will be removed from that corner and taken to the archivist. The site will then be cleaned. Also on October 18th, all the items currently located at the Veterans Memorial Site at the northwest corner of St. John's and Central will be relocated with care by Public Works to the Highland Park Library for archivist review and future distribution to families. Beginning later this week, signage will be placed at both of the current temporary memorial sites in English and in Spanish, with information on what happens next in these areas over the coming weeks. It will include a QR code to a landing page of additional information and resources. On November 5th, the new temporary memorial site at the Rose Garden will be officially in place. On that day, the city will place flowers at the southwest corner of St. John's and Central, with an invitation for those wishing to visit the former memorial site to take a flower in remembrance of the victims and walk it down to place it at the new temporary memorial in the Rose Garden. Flowers will be in place by 8 a.m., and will remain throughout the day as available so that families, community members, and others who wish to take a commemorative walk to the new temporary memorial site may do so in their own time. Preparations for readying the Rose Garden as the new temporary memorial are well underway. City staff has been working diligently to ensure the new site will be warm and welcoming for all, while also maintaining the vital element of optional participation. These preparations include the following steps: planned removal and eventual relocation of the antelope structure from the garden, planned additions for seasonal flowers, as well as other site beautification methods, purchase and installation of benches within the garden at the temporary memorial site, Purchasing and installing an all-weather ADA walkway system to provide ADA accessibility from the sidewalk into the garden. Working with the next of kin to honor their family members as they wish them to be represented within the memorial. Each of the victims will have a plaque representing their life taken that will be purchased by the city and installed within the garden. Throughout these preparations, we are operating with an objective to do no harm and have been balancing the varying viewpoints and recommendations. We are also working to embrace and understand the needs of different people, understanding that everyone grieves differently, and people have different cultures, backgrounds, experience, and expectations. We will continue to try and ensure that all parties feel they have had their say, and we will try to take into account elements of recommendations specifically from the next of kin whose loved one died on 7/4.
Thank you, Erin. I appreciate the deliberative process that staff has been taking in an effort to balance this difficult situation. And thank you also to Dr. Cynthia Plazas, the social worker of the police department, who's been in touch with each of the families. Just want to thank you all for the care that you're taking and putting this together as we move through this difficult challenge and try to do what we can to support our community. Much appreciated. Thank you. Is there any business from the council? Hearing none, we can continue on to business from the public. This is for people wishing to be heard on items not on tonight's specified agenda. So if you're here to speak on something not on tonight's agenda, I invite you to come to the podium. You have 3 minutes to share what's on your mind, or we can continue on with our scheduled business. Seeing none, we'll continue on with our scheduled business. Items 1 and 2 are grouped together for omnibus consideration. I'm seeking a motion to approve items 1 and 2.
So moved.
Any comments or questions on 1 and 2? No. Any from the public? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the vote?
Councilmember Tapia?
Aye.
Councilmember Stolberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Stone?
Aye.
Councilmember Bloomberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Holloman? Councilmember Littwer?
Aye.
Mayor Rotering?
Aye. 6 ayes, no nays. Items 1 and 2 have been approved. Item 3, consideration of a Plan and Design Commission recommendation for a special use permit with lighting variation 1535 to 1549 Park Avenue West. We are in receipt of an updated narrative and would love to invite the applicant forward as we continue to have some questions, and I suspect the public may want to share some thoughts as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you again for entertaining us, and we appreciate your consideration. When we were here, my name is Dan Shapiro, I'm here on behalf of the applicant. When we were here on September 12th, there was a lot of comment, a lot of questions from all of you and the public. We've done our best to address those. Whether our best is good enough for some of the residents, I can't tell you that. But we've done our best to try to address those and try to respond to as many comments as possible as we have since May of this year. What I'd like to do is just ask for your indulgence for a couple minutes as I kind of summarize some of those responses. I know you have the letter, but I'd like to summarize those responses for those who haven't had the benefit of looking at the letter, and a couple of other follow-up questions that we got from staff, as well as the public. The response letter is dated September 29th, so I'm hoping that gave folks, residents, and yourself an adequate amount of time to think about it and to consider those responses. One of the comments was to eliminate security lighting, reduce, and you'll see in my letter, the bold is the comment, and then the italics is our response. I said in my letter, we've eliminated 4 light poles. I was incorrect. It was 3 on the west side. We've also eliminated another light pole. Further, there's a reduction in further reduction in lighting will compromise security. Next item, security building on the building to be shielded and mounted at a lower height in the building. We have indicated that we will shield those lights. In addition to removing the 3 light poles on the west side, we've also agreed to shield the lights. We cannot, or we've chosen not to lower them. What we learned at the PDC, as well as in our own comings and goings. You lower the lights, you're going to create more spots, dark spots, which will result in having to put in more lights. So we've removed lights, and we have lowered, we've shielded the lights on the building. An 8-inch instead of a 6-inch solid board fence. Part of this response is in the landscaping plan that we've offered to you. We've actually offered an alternative landscaping plan, which is all evergreens. We feel that the density of the evergreens is an adequate shield, if you will, for an additional 2 feet on the fence. You can put a 20-foot fence up there, but at some point, someone's going to be able to see something over any height. So we thought, and we believe that the evergreens would provide adequate shielding for the additional 2 feet, or in lieu of the 2 feet. What I said last time, and I think I got some oohs and ahs, remains true to this day. Finding an 8-foot fence with supply chain is very difficult, if not impossible. That's an additional, not the most important, but an additional reason for 6 rather than 8 feet. The traffic study. We've spent several months, as you know, before the PDC. Not at any point did they ask us for a traffic study. We provided our own data to the PDC, which I referred to you last time I was here. We've also looked at this in the context of what sort of traffic will the SUP, which is the storage, which is about 125 spaces, what sort of traffic will the storage spaces generate? And we have declined the invitation to do a traffic study in light of all of those. We have provided our own data, and we have moved forward through this process without a recommendation over the last 4 months, 5 months, a suggestion for one. Retime or otherwise improve the operation of traffic light at Park Avenue. I've responded by saying this is not our responsibility nor reasonably related to the project. Garage doors. We will keep the garage doors closed, except when it gets hot. And when it gets hot, you have to keep them open so that the workers, the men and women in there, don't faint. Service centers, as a custom and practice and as an industry, don't have air conditioning, so they rely upon fans. So there's going to be a fan in there, but when it gets hot, and I think I indicated 85 degrees, those doors have to open to keep the safety of those men and women who are working there. At all other times, just like you see with other service facilities, the doors are closed. People go drive their car in, garage goes, and then the garage closes behind them. There'll be no other reason. I mean, that same SOP would be followed. Stormwater sewers, how will they function? We gave you a rather technical answer with regards to the release rate. They were designed for a 10-year flood. The maximum allowable release rate is 0.15 for a 100-year storm, 24-hour storm event. Of course, the release rate would have to comply with Lake County Watershed Development Ordinance and your own vetting by your own engineering staff. So it's going to go through 2 layers, if you will, of scrutiny. And those engineers will make sure that the release rate and the release are appropriate. They'll work with our engineer to make sure that happens. I'm not going to read to you the technical answer because it's kind of technical and long. Provide better rendering showing how the lighting in the building would look from a neighborhood's perspective. We gave you a perspective from 15 feet high from an adjacent home. We cannot give you what it would look like at nighttime. We gave you what it would look like during the daytime. And the reason that we can't is not that we're unwilling to, it's that the software doesn't do it. And so the software that the architects use to do these renderings will not give you a clear perspective on what it looks like at night. What we've done from 15 feet. What we've done is we've tried to give you our best perspective from 15 feet during the daytime. We've also provided you additional renderings, perspectives, and an alternate landscape plan. Include more evergreens. On the west side, the current landscape plan shows 116 trees and the alternate shows 143 trees. That was drafted by me, and then there was a revised memo that came in from our landscape architect, which changes those numbers a little bit, and I'm going to address that in just a second. So what we're offering, or what we've suggested, is 2 landscape plans. Here's the one with all evergreens. Here's our original one. This is what we got. Increase the height of the berm from 6 to 8 feet. You know, anything is possible. We could increase that berm to 20 feet. But the impact that has on the site is something that I would ask that we all remember. If you increase the berms higher than they are, that's going to have impact on the spacing for the parking. It's going to remove some parking. And it's going to shift everything. And frankly, that's not something we want to do and offer yet another 5th or 6th site plan. We've done the best we can under the circumstances and the site planning that we have prepared. We have put berms 2 to 3 feet high with the landscaping that last meeting I called extraordinary. And this is what we have. The fence around the detention pond, because of the depth of the detention pond, the retention, the release rate, that detention pond is primarily going to be dry. So someone would say, well, will it be wet? Technically, it will be wet, but it's designed to be a dry detention pond. It will release quickly. The property is fenced. Based upon our discussions with engineering, best practices do not call for a fence around detention. There's also native plantings in the detention itself. So to the extent there's some concern about harm or danger, you're going to have plantings in the detention in what I call a dry detention. Tree replacement calculation, I'll get to that in just one second. Signage, you know, we reduced the proposed signage from 24 inches to 18 inches. There's a little typo there, to 18 inches on the building. On the building that would be permitted. And I think someone may have got upset when we talked, last time when we talked about the term permitted as of right. The building is permitted as a matter of right. And when you have a building that's permitted as of right, like any business in this fine city, that building is able to put a sign. So we've reduced the signage to 18 inches with the recommendations of the PDC for backlit, so it remains as subtle as possible. Floor plans. In the floor plans, we put an area identified in the floor plans as paint area that has been relabeled to prep area. There was considerable discussion about painting last time, and I hope I made it clear that there's no spray painting. Paintless repairs is what we will do, and so that will not be a paint room. Some additional comments from some follow-ups from our architect. With regards to lighting, shielding will be provided on all light poles at the building wall lights. The building fixtures shine the building fixtures shine directly down at roughly 20 feet high. The fixture will produce a cone of light that falls 20 feet away. So the fixtures are located away from the property lines at 40 feet to the east and 190 feet to the west. With regards to a concern that there was, why is the building 27 feet high? It's because you have lifts in the building that are 15, and then you need 5 feet clearance, that's 20, and then you need to frame it. So that's why it's 27 feet high, which is still considerably lower than what would otherwise be permitted in this industrial zoning district. With regards to a comment about test driving, the test drives will go on Route 41. There's no reason to go to the right or west, and all the employees who do test drives will be instructed as such. But the test drives really go to 41. With regard to the tree survey, I think you may have received a revised tree survey dated October 3rd. And just to summarize, there were 427 trees surveyed. Of those, 246 are in good condition, 181 in poor condition. Of the 426, 175 would be preserved. Protected trees to be removed would be 201. Of the protected trees to be removed, 73 were poor. So we hope that not only the calculations and the removal inventory list rather, but also the condition of the trees gives some additional clarity on the trees to be removed as well as the trees to be planted. Speaking about trees in landscaping, you can see that there are two alternatives, both of which in general exceed the landscape ordinance requirements. Some are increased, some are decreased, but there are two alternatives that we're offering for you. The service center facility is intended to be for bigger projects. When I say that, I mean projects that require more time. So for cars that require 4 or more hours to be serviced. That's what that service center facility is intended for. So there was some discussion about the movements of the cars. Please understand that the movements of the cars for the cars that are being serviced is not going to be as rapid as perhaps some folks think, because those cars are intended to be there for a while. I'm hoping that we hit many of the highlights. I must tell you that I am aware that we got some additional comments as of 2:30 this afternoon, and we're just not able to respond to those because they came in at 2:30 this afternoon. But we are trying to be as responsive to what we heard last week and as well maybe the beginning of October. So with that, we are hoping for your consideration, your favorable consideration tonight. We would like a vote tonight.
Okay,
We would like to have some resolution to this, whether it's up or down.
sure.
We certainly had our hearings before the PDC and before you last month. So we ask for your favorable consideration, and all of us are available to answer any questions. Unfortunately, I have to leave, so no disrespect, but I have to leave at 6:15. So if you see me leave, it's not because I'm mad at anybody. It's just I have another obligation, so thank you.
Understood. Stay put, because I think we have some questions. Thank you. First of all, I appreciate that the PDC didn't recommend, traffic studies didn't recommend a higher fence. Recognize, as you know, the PDC recommends to us. So when we ask
Understood.
those questions, I appreciate the hard work of the PDC and the many months of work and hearings that they've had.
So do we. And,
Okay.
And I forgot to mention one thing. I apologize.
Go ahead.
And we understand it's a recommending body. We fully understood.
Okay.
But one thing that I remember very clearly in my mind coming from the chairman, who kind of put us through the ringer, to be honest, is he said, in so many words, that what he has seen from Mueller in terms of the responses has been above and beyond. And I know you're not bound by that. I understand that. But to me, that's a very meaningful statement coming from your chairman of the PDC.
Okay.
That through all of those hearings, he recognized that what we have done since May was above and beyond what we needed to, what we had to, and was in a way of being a responsive, good neighbor and strong applicant.
Okay.
So that's what I forgot to say.
Appreciate hearing that from our chairman, our esteemed chairman. So I have a couple of questions. I still can't visualize this from your drawings, and I was kind of surprised that we didn't really get much of a response in that realm, because from others, we have had a better sort of estimation configuration, so I'm chastened by that, not happy. One question that I do have, and this is very specific, the noise that is coming from this building, whether it's the fans for exhaust, whether it's the sound of tires being rotated, When it is over 85 degrees, how are we getting the doors open? Is it honk to open? Do you run over a little bell that goes off inside? Like, what are the noises that this neighborhood will be hearing on a regular basis? That's one question that I have for you.
So does anyone from operations want to talk? Mark, you want to address that? Or Harry?
I'll just keep rolling with my
Sure,
questions.
until
and then
Harry
you guys
comes up.
can
Sure, absolutely.
Get yourselves together. Thank you for clarifying the 18-inch, not the 18-foot sign on the building. Is there going to be ask for a lit sign on the street? A
Not
backlit
on the
sign?
street, on the building.
And that should be shielded then, both by angle and by landscaping,
It should
that
be.
people shouldn't see
Yeah.
it. Okay, and then, I think that's it for me at this point. I know Councilmember Bloomberg had a question as well, but you were going to give me an answer on noise first.
Yeah, my name is Harry Kim. I'm the general manager at Muller Subaru. Your question about the garage door open, those are sensored,
Okay.
operated. So when the vehicle pulls up within 5 feet of it, they open. When they fully drive in, they'll close automatically.
And will people hear those doors going up and down all day long?
They're actually quieter than your home garage doors.
Okay,
They're pretty quiet.
great, thank you. Councilmember Bloomberg, did you want to ask your question?
I have some questions, and I wanted to make some observations if this is an apt time to do that, Mayor.
Yeah,
Okay. First of all, without indicating how I feel either way, I do appreciate the presentations and the efforts that the applicant has made. At the same time, we were asked a question last time by residents, how would we feel about having this built across the street from our homes? That's often asked in response to proposals that a resident may be unhappy with, and most of the time, I'm satisfied that the answer to that is I would be okay with it, and I've had developments built near my neighborhood or in my neighborhood where other residents are uncomfortable with it. But in this instance, I have to say, yes, I would not be happy with this across the street from my home. Now, having said that, there are several observations I want to make generally for the record, and some of these are repetitions of what Councilmember Stolberg highlighted at our last meeting, but I think that they bear repeating so that we understand what our limits are as a city council and what we can and can't do for you. Part of this proposal, and the part that seems to be drawing the greatest concern from residents, is the car repair facility. That's the building. That building is what was described by right. That's not the technical term. The technical term is that it is a permitted use. Had this applicant come forward with a request to build the permitted use, the car repair facility on this site, using the entire site as a car repair facility, as a permitted use, it would be an application for a building permit. It would have to meet our engineering codes. If there were any zoning variances, it would have to go in front of the ZBA, but they're not seeking any zoning variances. So under those circumstances, there would be no plan commission review, and there would be no review by the city council. These are policy issues that only attach to the special use, which is the car storage. Keeping that in mind, that if Muller simply wanted to build a car repair facility on this site, they're permitted to do that without our approval, without our input, and without your input. That's a matter that is handled by our building department. It would have to comply with engineering requirements. It would have to meet state, local, and federal engineering standards and environmental standards, but the use of this property for that purpose is permitted. So when we look at the special use, which does permit us to put requirements and demands on the developer, there is a risk in this unique situation that if we overburden the developer with requests and demands to accommodate needs, that if it becomes too expensive to this applicant, they can simply walk away from this proposal and build the car repair facility and not store new cars on the site. And they would have a right to do that with no further input. I don't like the level that we've reached. I don't think it's completely adequate. I know many people in this room agree with me about that. I would like to see a higher berm. I would like to see more dense foliage around the site. I would like to see an amelioration of the lighting. I would like there to be a number of other concessions, but these are expensive. And at some point, Mueller indicated at the last meeting that they would potentially walk away from this if too much more was imposed upon them. That means there would potentially be no berm, and there wouldn't be a requirement to meet the level of foliage which they are agreeing to put in. It may mean no detention or retention pond if they simply want to pave this site over, as long as they meet our engineering requirements for runoff. So it's important to keep that in mind as we ask this applicant to meet certain needs that we as a community have. It is true that this proposal would be a benefit to Highland Park as a whole, and in my mind, it is also true that it would have an adverse impact on the neighborhood. So the question is, if we say ultimately no, we don't think the level of accommodations that are being made are adequate, and we vote against this, we're only voting against the special use permit. And that means that the applicant can simply present an application for a building permit to go ahead with the car repair facility. I do know that you want to use this for a new car lot. I understand that's important to you, and I think that's the reason you've attempted to make accommodations. And I hope that you will continue to do that in the spirit that you have been moving forward in order to ameliorate this and make it as palatable as you can for the community. There was a question as to whether this should be a planned unit development because it is two principal uses. But again, if we overburden the applicant, even under that approach, the permitted use could still be applied for. Lastly, I want to address the issue of rezoning this property. Even if I were to make a motion, or some member of this council were to make a motion tonight to rezone the property, that would then send this to the Plan Commission for review and then back to the City Council for a vote. And during that time, this applicant would have a right to file a building permit to go forward with the permitted use under the current zoning. So rezoning, in addition to which it would potentially open the city up to litigation, expensive litigation, regardless of the outcome. So those are the things that I'm weighing in my mind. Do we pass up the opportunity to attempt to regulate the development of this property that is going to include a permitted use through the special use? And keep in mind that some of what we've asked this applicant to consider is directed at the permitted use and not at the special use. They're willing to do that, but if they simply go forward with a permitted use, they could build the repair facility and the garage with the garage door facing Park Avenue. They've agreed to turn it around so that it's faced away from the neighborhood. I think those things are important, and I'm concerned about the issue of potentially calling the bluff and saying, no, we're not going to agree to the special use permit, particularly where there was a remark on the record by the developer's representative that they would go ahead with the permitted use if we vote down the special use. So those are the things that are on my mind. I welcome comments from the public to help us find a way through these issues.
Thank you. Council members?
Mayor,
Yeah, jump in, please.
if I may, I don't want to undermine anything that Councilmember Bloomberg just said, but I do want to clarify an issue that was racing around yesterday, and that is the interpretation of Section 150.402 of our zoning code. Much has been said about certain words within that definition concerning the whether or not this particular application would require plan development approval. Our consistent interpretation of this provision is that it applies to two principal structures. Land uses, I understand that there's the word land use within the definition, but when we look to interpretation of code, we look to custom, we look to practice, we look to consistency, we look to precedent, and our consistent approach to this particular definition is that it applies to two separate structures that would require a plan development. There are not two structures being proposed here. We have numerous.
Corporation Counsel, hang on one second. Mr. Shapiro, who should we be addressing as you're departing?
Simon.
Who?
Simon or Harry?
Simon or Harry? All righty. I just wanted to know who I was calling on when we have questions.
Please excuse me and have a comment.
All right, no worries. Take care.
we've-
Thanks. We'll continue with our questioning of Simon and Harry. Go ahead.
We have numerous instances of land uses, of separate land uses, separate businesses on the same zoning lot where we have not required a plan development approval. So my advice, my recommendation, my legal opinion to staff is that this provision does not require plan development in this particular instance. You could look at all other issues that have been put before you, but I wanted to put that issue to bed.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Councilmember Stone.
Thank you. I've got 4 or 5 questions. I'm going to try and get the ones that I think you're going to be able to deal with first. Is this facility just being used for the Subaru dealership?
Yes.
Okay, because that was what was in the documents, but I know there's other Muller dealerships.
Yeah, no,
those-
it'll be only be
This is
used by
just
Muller
Subaru.
Subaru.
Okay. The tree replacement came up, and it was stated that the tree replacement plan met the requirements, but the forester's memo that was in our packet said that the current plan was still deficient by about 45 trees. I don't know if that's a question for staff. Who's got the right answer?
We're gonna have our
I can respond to that. That's more of a staff question, Madam Mayor, if that's what you'd like. It wouldn't be an applicant question, so.
Okay.
If I may. So there are 2 codes that apply here, the zoning code and then the Chapter 94, which has to do with tree preservation in our city. And so in terms of the zoning code, that's one aspect of it, but what you're referring to now is the Chapter 94 tree preservation. And so there would be, in terms of the number of trees that are counted for that provision, there would be a deficit. That is correct, because the arborvitae do not count for tree replacement.
Now, if the arborvitae did count, would the plan meet the code, do you know?
It's based on caliper size, so I don't know. That's the thing about that. It's what's the caliper size of an arborvitae? It's not considered like a tree like that.
Yeah.
You could look at that. I don't know what those caliper size are. That's not how we looked at those.
Okay. Because
But
I
they did increase the number of those quite substantially, so.
Okay, and I know you had said earlier in the day when we spoke that the arborvitae does provide good screening and in the
Yes.
past had been used on some developments.
That is correct. It wouldn't be the first time that council approved something that had arborvitae and a payment in lieu. That is correct, for the tree replacement, quote unquote.
Thank you. I've got a question about the lighting.
Okay.
I see that the poles were reduced from 9 to 6 along the west side of the property. Heads are nodding. I want to confirm that those are only on when the property is open. Is that right? With those?
Correct.
Okay, and the lumens on those fixtures have been cut, it looks like, by about half. I think they were 13,000 before, now they're about 6,000.
Simon Yu, architect. No, those lumens remain per fixture, they remain the same. But, we did reduce roughly a third of the poles along the one side, along the west side.
And then my last question is that last time we had this conversation, there were several conditions that were proposed by the PDC, a pedestrian crossing at Park Avenue at the railroad tracks, no motor vehicle sales or public access on the property, the lights at 3,000 Kelvin or less, the issue we've already discussed about keeping the bays closed the majority of the time unless the temperature is at a certain level. Do we have consensus to incorporate those conditions into the documents if we move forward?
Yes, whatever. Not the,
Yeah, I believe,
Sorry, yep, I will try, thank you.
okay, I believe that the last time we spoke about all of those, the crossroad was something that would be reviewed with, I forget exactly who, the engineering staff or a different body, I'll say, that's with the city. And that was kind of tabled. The rest of them we agree to.
I think you're conflating two issues. One is the light timing of the traffic signal, and the other is the actual crossing. I thought that was the-
No,
No, I'm
I'm
not?
not.
Okay, all right. I thought that was a public benefit that went along with
Yeah,
the
I think so
project.
as well.
You're saying no?
No. There was a recommendation.
yeah, there was a recommendation that it will be worked with the developer in the future to plan something out, but we remember from Public Works, right, Mike? That they said that this should not reflect on this special use permit.
So that didn't come from the PDC. It came
Please
from-
come up to the microphone just because we're recording.
Sorry, I'm Mark
That's
Muller.
okay. Hi, Mark.
That came from the engineering department or Public Works. It didn't come from the PDC.
Okay.
Okay, thank
And
you.
it was just their idea. They wanted to try and work with us. It just is
Okay.
obviously very expensive to do that.
To put a crosswalk?
Railroad.
Yeah, because you have to move
Crossing.
the railroad, you have to
Oh.
move you have to move
The
everything.
crossing gates.
Crossing gates, everything, yeah.
Okay, I thought the crosswalk was across, okay.
There is
It's
one
across-
across on the
right
other
there,
side.
Right, on the other side, okay. And I want to just thank Councilmember Bloomberg for your really detailed explanation. It's always very helpful to learn from your expertise.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Councilmember Stolberg.
Thanks, Mayor. My colleague, Councilmember Bloomberg, hit exactly on the head what my concern is. As I said at the last meeting, we have a unique situation where this special use permit application gives us an opportunity to put conditions potentially on the overall project that we may not be able to if the repair facility went in as a permitted use. So I too have concerns. I've spoken to many of the neighbors. I've been to neighbors' houses, stood on their driveways to try and envision what this is going to look like from near and far. And I'm troubled with not allowing potentially the SUP and risking what I believe are a lot of, although it may not be enough for all of the neighbors, what I believe is a genuine effort on the part of the applicant. I do have one question. I don't know if it's for the architect or the engineer. I know one of the concerns was the detention facility, both in the amount of water standing, the overall size of the facility, and the concern of the neighbors for mosquitoes and things breeding in standing water. Was there any consideration to, instead of a detention facility, a retention pond that would allow you to go deeper but smaller, and then potentially an aerator or a fountain that could create an amenity that might soften the site or add some tranquility to a lot of concrete and a building? In my mind, if you go deeper, you can go smaller. I don't know how it works with the release rates and the things that the engineers would have to calculate, but maybe that's a potential way to address that situation to the neighbors and the concerns there.
Michael Mondes, Space Co-Engineering, civil engineer for the project. That was discussed at the Plan Review Commission, and my explanation at the time is that we are limited by how deep the basin can go by the outfall.
Okay.
So the basin is as deep as it can be for the site outfall. Otherwise, if we go deeper, we'd have to pump the water back up to release it. So the basin's as deep as it can be, and it's storing as much water at the top elevation that the site will allow. Otherwise, we have to start raising the site up even more than it is. So as much as I understand, and you're absolutely right, If we could make the basin deeper, we could make it smaller, but the basin is what it is based on the size that's required by the release rate and the ordinance.
How difficult would it be to put a submersible pump and pump some of that water up?
Well, it's a significant cost associated with building, you're basically putting in a lift station for stormwater, which in the engineering practice is not really a good practice, because when you have big storms, what's the first thing that goes out is the power.
Of course.
And now there's no power to run that lift station to pump the water out. Now you could put a backup generator, but again, now you're artificially doing what nature should be doing. Which
And you'll
is
create more
allowing-
noise.
Correct?
You'll create noise when that generator goes on.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Anything else? Nope. Okay. Councilmember Tapia?
Yeah, I also want to express mixed feelings, like my council member colleagues have done. I appreciate the work of the PDC, trying to get to a place of, managing way through the dilemma. I appreciate the efforts you've done up to a point in trying to address that. I'm still very much bothered by the fact that certain things were asked for, not even to do, but even look into doing, have not been addressed. The excuse that the software cannot do it and give the vantage point that we had asked for, because I think that's a very important issue. As a businessman who has to work with clients all the time, if my software can't do it, I found an alternative to do it. Even if it's pencil and paper, there's ways of answering that question. So I find that disturbing. On the issue of the not doing the study, the traffic study, I understand it's costly. I understand that you feel confident that your estimates are accurate. And I try to take you at face value, and the neighbors had their own calculations. So I'm comparing, your study, which is a point of view, and their study, which is a point of view, without an official study, and they're not even close. So we can say that maybe there's an overestimation. Okay, I can grant you that point. But the difference between those two numbers are so vast that without a factual, third-party, verified traffic study, that the concern of the neighbors that this will increase traffic in a significant way weighs heavily on me. And I'm not reassured that it won't be. So foregoing the traffic study, I think, has worked against you, because I have no basis to believe that the neighbors are wrong on that one. The issue of the bay door being closed, until it got 85 degrees, I think that's not a very, common sense argument, because 85 degrees is pretty high. And 75 degrees on a humid day with people that have different tolerances for heat could be considered too hot for your workers. And you want to protect them, we want to protect it. So holding you accountable to 85 degrees kind of sets it up for a very, contentious situation. At what point the doors, it's 84 degrees, it's 80 degrees, you have to open it up. Neighbors are going to say, hey, it's not 85. And we're going to be in a very difficult, contentious situation. It'll be an ongoing argument, as we have seen in other situations where something that's really not enforceable and not very commonsensical would be a problem. And then finally, I have other smaller concerns, but the other big one is the berm. That was declared by the neighbors, and I think declared by several of us here, that was very important. And so if you lose some parking spaces, well, maybe that's what it would take to have addressed really one of the biggest one of the most important ideas that I think the neighbors had in terms of really trying to shield their neighborhood from your property work. So where this lands me as a public servant is, obviously we have to be fiduciary responsible. We have to abide by the zoning laws. There's things that you can do by the rights that you have. But also, as the elected officials, we're elected to represent the needs of our residents. And sometimes, when we're managing different stakeholders, sometimes the needs of the one are compatible with the needs of the others. And we're responsible for managing the dilemmas within the limits of the law, of course. And so, in the end, on what basis can we develop a point of view? And I find myself looking at neighbors, and I've been to the neighborhood, I've walked the neighborhood, I've seen the property from different places like others have here too, and I see that if this goes up, it will affect the neighborhood in a forever way. So it's not just a casual thing. And I see that the neighborhood, when I look at the standards, for granting SUP, there's 8, and I just look at the first 3, the special use will serve the public convenience at the location of the subject property, and the establishment, maintenance, and operation of special use will not be detrimental or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, and general welfare. Does your permit meet that standard? It does not. Second, the location and size of the special use, the nature and intensity of the operation involved in conducting of the special use, the size of the subject property in relation to such a special use, and the location of the site with respect to streets giving access to it shall be that they will be in harmony with the appropriate orderly development of the zoning district which is located. Does your petition meet that standard? It does not. Number 3, that the special use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity of the subject property for the purposes already permitted in such zoning district, not substantially diminish and impair the value of the property in the neighborhoods. Does a permit request meet that standard? No, it does not. So there's 3, the first 3, and this is what I hear the neighbors keep saying. This is going to change the nature of the neighborhood. It's going to change our ability to enjoy it. It's going to change the experience that we have here. Are these 2 needs incompatible? They are. Are you permitted to do certain things? You are. But when I look at the special use permit, on what basis will I find myself leaning toward making a decision? It does not meet the requirements. So in the end, this is sort of where I'm leaning. And the thing that sort of stuck with me in a negative way about the response is that certain things that were asked to say, well, if you can meet these, we may have a chance to navigate this. You do not. And then it was very clear from Mr. Shapiro that this is your final offer. This is what you've gone as far as you feel you can go. You want to vote tonight. So given that, I don't see any more leeway here to kind of keep finding an alternative. So I would sort of end with a final statement to the points that my colleagues have made, that we may give up the ability to influence certain things, that you might want to do whatever you want because you have nothing to, it didn't help you get the SUP. Well, I believe that you're people of character. I believe that Mr. Miller has been a fine citizen and very good for our citizenry. If you were not to address these needs that the neighbors brought up just because you did not get the SUP, I don't believe that. I don't believe that you would lack the character, the lack of neighborliness, just because you didn't get one thing to then do whatever you want that doesn't address the needs of the neighbor. So I'm willing to take the bet that you will, out of just neighborliness and common sense and common humanity, that if we vote against the SUP, if we vote, I don't know what the final count will be, but if it goes against your request, that you will not go, you will demonstrate your better angels on this one.
Please keep, we're not doing that. Thank you. Director Fontaine, do you know what the height of the berms are at the Highland Park Hospital and at the high school parking lot on Vine and St. John's? I know that's like a pop quiz.
I don't have that specific number, Madam Mayor, but they're certainly larger than 2 feet or 3 feet, yes, in many cases.
But 6, 8?
I don't know. I think that the high school might actually be a 3, but it's the Highland Park Hospital that's higher than that, I
Right,
think.
and we don't know what those are.
I don't know what those are, but
Okay.
now that you say that, I think the high school might be 3 on that St. John's and Vine.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Littleworth?
Okay, so quite a few questions, and they're really directed at a lot of different people here tonight. So along the lines of what Councilmember Tapia just said, I think this is about neighborliness. And I actually, in my reading of the special use permit versus a PUD, the language is very clear. And so whatever has happened in practice, I think the PDC needs to review the language, and this needs to change, because if we're not, in fact, operating under what the language is, you are correct, there's precedent for doing it as 2 structures, but it very clearly says, which contains any other principal structure or land use. And once you have or land use, you have 2. And those 2 things on one property constitute a PUD. So if that's the way we've been doing it, I can understand why under precedent we would continue that, and I can see why we're not going to follow what is written in our own ordinance yet again, but we need to clean it up and clarify it, because that is not what's stated here. So that's my first statement, and that has to do with us and PDC. And I think it needs to change because it's unclear. Secondly, I think that there are a lot of issues that came to us, and I thank the public, I thank Mueller for addressing them, but because this has been before the PDC 3 and 4 times for several months, you've come before us, and until this last time, I really felt there was a tremendous amount of accommodation based on what was asked of you by the PDC. Now, the PDC could have requested more, they didn't. I know they put in a lot of work and determined that this was a good way to go. But frankly, at this point, I think it does come down to neighborliness. And it's really about, where do you want to go with this? The one thing that, when this came to us, was stated was, we don't want to see it, we don't want to hear it. It is zoned this way. There's nothing wrong with what's coming up. But you have a neighborhood next door. So if you had a large berm, and there was a picture of something sent to us today, that would cover all of this. And so instead of arguing about 6 light poles versus 9 light poles, 18-inch sign versus 24-inch sign, we're the city council, we're not the PDC. We do not do the deep dive. That was done for 4 months and a lot of hearings. A lot of hearings back and forth, and these people have attempted to accommodate it, which is why we're here today. So if the berm would finally just address it, if you had a 6-foot berm, if we waited for an 8-foot fence, although I don't think a fence will change the lighting and the structure of the plantings that you have there, but if you did the larger berm, you would be starting on a much more neighborly footing in this area. I don't see any reason in denying you your SUP, because we want to accommodate you so that you will accommodate the neighbors. And I know you've tried to do that very hard and done a lot of things we asked you initially. But the berm is the main issue, and the rest of these things are small red herrings that would be covered up if it was high enough and there was this proper buffer. My first meeting on PDC was in 2019, and at that meeting, this was considered in terms of light industrial, in terms of what do you need. And the language from the city council following that said, we need a large buffer. We need to ensure that we have a buffer that accommodates the flow from light industrial to a neighborhood. I can read all the language to you, but all it really comes down to is cover it up so people can say, this is a neighborhood and this is our neighbor. And there are beautiful trees and bushes here, and they're running their business as they see fit. I'm not going to talk to you about the temperatures. You know how to run your business. It's not about that. It's really about being an accommodating neighbor. So I would just ask if there's a way to consider changing the size of your berm. Frankly, that will accommodate it, and we need to clean up our act in terms of our own language too, so that when we're looking at these things, there's a clear definition of what does a buffer mean? When do we need to put it in as a PUD versus an SUP? And we'll do that too.
Did you want to?
Sure.
Okay.
I want to give due deference to Councilmember Tapia, and I appreciate what you have said, and I understand your frustration. I think Mueller, who has been a part of our town for a long time, has demonstrated a neighborliness. I think the fact that they're willing to make accommodations that don't relate to the permitted use demonstrate that. But there are economic considerations that are always going to be considered as a matter of practicality, no matter what we would like or not like. And my question is, if they're not willing to make certain accommodations, such as the traffic study or build the berm 8 feet high, because economically we've reached a point where we're at the limit of what they're willing to do in order to have the special use, I'm not sure that I agree that the applicant is necessarily going to make all of the accommodations that are no longer necessary if the applicant only goes forward with the permitted use. They may still do a berm, but maybe they'll do a 2-foot berm. They may put in plantings, but they're not going to put in as many plantings. They're going to reach a level that they feel is a reasonable accommodation that may not be this much because financially they are not able to do certain things now. And that's a risk. I'm not saying that I disagree with where the final vote may be, but there is a point that is controlled by economics no matter how neighborly one may wish to be. And that is the risk, and that's the struggle I think that we're all having. I appreciate what you have done so far, whether or not it meets the needs of the residents who are before us and meets everything that I or any of us want to see. But the risk, of course, is if we vote no on the special use and the applicant goes forward with the permitted use, is it still going to meet the limitations that we have at least gotten to with the special use? I don't think that they will.
Thank you. Councilmember Stone, then Littleworth, then Stolberg.
Thanks. And that's what makes this such a difficult decision, because I think that this is, this is a site where the person who, or the company that owns this site has the ability to put something on there now based on the current zoning and has indicated that that's what they will do without any of the accommodations that they would make, subject to the special use permit. So it's a big risk if we say no to this, that the trees and the berm go away or are reduced significantly.
Thank you. Councilmember Littleworth.
The one other thing I wanted to mention about the berm is right now, I guess what has been offered is a 2-foot berm. And I understand that the building itself has been raised 2 feet. And so even though it's not right next to the berm, it's at a higher level also. So really, in essence, 2 feet really isn't even 2 feet, which is another reason why the 6 foot would make a huge difference, both in terms of the building structure, which is permitted to be there, but it's already up 2 feet. And if I'm wrong, please clarify that.
Michael Montes again, just to clarify, the berming along the west property line is 2 feet. The berming along Park is 3 feet.
I'm concerned about the west.
Okay, well, the berming along the west is 2 feet. The berming along Park is 3 feet.
And has the building been raised?
Well, the preliminary grading we originally submitted was for a smaller footprint of development because there was a different site plan. And I explained this at the PDC as well. As we've pushed and pulled this plan, the basin grew bigger, the impact to the existing trees has grown bigger, because we've pushed the site. The site's at a triangle, and as we've pushed it back and east, it's created more tree disturbance, more land disturbance, which required more detention. So I likened it to a balloon. When you squeeze a balloon, it's got to go somewhere, right? And that's kind of what's happened to the site plan. And if we increase the berm heights to 6 feet or 8 feet, that's just going to be exacerbated even more. The tension's going to grow to the back. It's going to get bigger. So that's the challenge. It's not that we don't want to do the 8-foot berm. It's that it's a challenge.
But I think that would clarify or help with a lot of the issues that have been faced. And if that one thing came through, you'd have more of the freedom, even though you have the legality and the ability to build.
Well, I can only tell you that the engineering side of it. Relative to your other question about the building height. So we did the original engineering plan. The building was at a certain elevation relative to the site grades. As the plan evolved, the basin got bigger. We're digging more dirt out of that basin to be able to, balance that dirt on site. So the building had to come up to balance the dirt on the site. So, all these things interrelate to each other. It's not just as simple as like, this is what we want, but there's cost implications to all these things.
No, I understand, and I really respect and understand how many times you shifted around, but I just want to be clear that what that really means is the berm isn't high at all, and that's why even asking for the 6 feet really is not that much, but thank you.
Councilmember Stolberg.
Thanks, Mayor. Feel free to slap me if I say something that's not right.
I won't do that, but you can
Well, you
say
could-
something and maybe
You know what
try
I
to
mean,
make it
scold
right.
me. I have a question that I've never asked an applicant. I think you've done an outstanding job. Really, truly, I've been at every plan commission meeting. Chairman Haynes was difficult. He held your feet to the fire, and not difficult in a bad way, difficult in the way that we want him to be as the chairman of that commission. Are you truly all in on the height of the berm? I want to say yes,
I'll answer.
and I'm struggling.
So
Is that a fair
if
question?
Yeah.
If the berm is designed to fit on the lot as best possible as an accommodation. So if we make the berm, Mike's going to have to answer this, if we make the berm taller, it has to get
Understood.
wider, exactly like the pond, the detention pond that we're building. The detention pond is designed with a lot of extra, Catherine would have to answer this, plantings inside of it to make it more, like you had said earlier, where you suggested having water in the pond. This has special plants growing inside of it. Now, that beautifies the area. It's not going to protect people that are on the top floor of their homes, but it's something nicer than what's there. So we're forgetting about what's been there. There's been for years and years a dilapidated building that we cleaned out ourselves that had needles, all kinds of paraphernalia inside of it. It was broken into many times. That structure existed there for a long time. And everybody lived there and nobody said anything about it. I don't know what was there before that. I don't know what was there after that, but we've been, hold on. I haven't had a chance to talk. You guys have had 6 months to talk. So I would appreciate, I didn't say one word when you guys were talking. I think that's completely unfair. We're trying to beautify the neighborhood. We're trying to work with you. We've almost doubled the cost of the project. I'm at the point where it's not worth it for me to do it anymore. And I know in everybody's minds, they're very happy with that because we're the bad guy. But we did make an investment in the town. We did make an investment in trying to improve our business. Our business does serve some of the people here in the town. I'm sure everybody in this room will never come to us again, but that's their choice. We've been trying to work with everybody. We've been trying to do that. I will go back to the drawing board for the 7th or 8th time. I'll spend more money and I'll raise the berm. But I'm not promising that I'm going to make it 6 feet at all. If I push my building back farther, I got to go back and change everything else. It's gotten to the point where it's ridiculous. I don't know how I refer to you, Councilman Hain. Never once did anybody, any of my colleagues or my partner, Mr. Kim is a partner in the business, a 10% partner as of 2 years ago, trying to expand our reach. Never once did we, I'm almost offended by this, never once did we discuss making this a call situation. I'm not gambling. People who are business owners don't gamble. We make decisions to grow our business, to make things better for our customers. That is what this is. It's not a gamble. I'm not asking anybody to call. If I go back and pull the SUP, then I'll do most of the accommodations that we've already agreed to. And I'm looking at you right in the face, and they can all write it down on their little pads. But this is silly. It's gotten way too out of hand at this point. So we want to go forward. We want to work. We think we've been, the final drawings that we've submitted have changed substantially from what we originally, so I thought that was the accommodations that we were making. If you want some further accommodations, I'd be happy to go back and look at it one more time so that we're not wasting everybody's time. I don't want you to sit here and listen to another 3 minutes of everybody in the room, and I'm not trying to say that what you don't have to say is very important, because we've been listening to everybody for 6 months. I hear what you're saying. If it was in my neighborhood, I would want the same accommodations. But I think that we're trying our very best to work within the parameters of operating a business in a profitable manner. I don't want to overbuild something and have something there that doesn't serve any purpose for us. So I appreciate all of you, and I think that it's amazing and wonderful that as a neighborhood, you've all come together and you've been able to come up here, and at every single one of these meetings, we let everybody say everything, and we really listen. I wrote it down in my own notepads, and with every discussion that we met with our colleagues, we tried to put these things in in as cost-effective way as possible and to work with the city. My father has been here since 1974. He's still alive. He still comes into the business, and he's taught me, like, all along the way, you got to work with your neighbors, with the people around you. We've always practiced our business, and take care of your backyard is the term that we use. You guys are our backyard, like, literally and figuratively, and we're going to take care of it. That's the best that I can offer. You didn't there's we have a lot of trees in there, and yeah, it takes 5 years for the trees to grow in, but it'll look much better than it looks right now. It's been a dilapidated old building, and with a lot of crime going in and out of there, and I think that this might be a better option. And I feel offended that that you think that we're up here taking a gamble. Honestly, that never even came up in any discussion. I wouldn't do that anyways.
No intention to offend whatsoever, and I'm not quite sure where that came from, so please recognize that that's never our intention, and we certainly don't view you as taking a gamble. You have been a respected and valued part of the business community of Highland Park, and we appreciate it. With that being said, it sounds as though you are willing to move forward in considering adding a higher berm to this project?
Well, here he brings up a good point. Like, if I don't mind going back to the drawing table and trying to work with the berm. Maybe there's a way that the city can approve without making the berm wider, making it a little higher. I don't know if that's possible or not. The berm is built.
Condition.
I mean, I will just say this, and for every foot the berm goes up, you need 8 foot of horizontal space. So you figure you go up 4 feet and you have to go down 4 feet. So right now we have a 2-foot berm along that west property line. If we went to an 8-foot berm, that's a 6-foot increase, which is about 48 feet more of horizontal space we need. So the detention pond runs along that west property line, so what'll end up happening is the detention pond will squeeze east and it's going to grow north. So, means we're going to cut down more trees, footprint of the basin's going to get bigger. I mean, so these are all things that we've weighed as consideration. I mean, and that, the fence and the landscaping were offsets to the fact that we couldn't do a higher berm. So, I mean, I certainly understand it, but it's just, there's other factors that weigh into this. We're trying to satisfy a lot of different masters and requests.
Oh, totally understand. Thank you. Councilmember Stone?
So don't go. So how wide is a 2-foot berm?
It goes up 16 feet.
No, so a 2-foot berm, you're saying, is how wide?
Is 16 feet wide?
Yes, correct. So every foot you go up in a berm, it's usually a 4-to-1 slope. So you go up 1 foot vertically, 4 foot horizontally. So 2 feet, you go up 2 feet, and 8 foot horizontally. So we're going to go up, and you got to go back down.
So a 6-foot berm would be an increase of 4 times.
Correct.
8, so 30.
So it's another 50 feet roughly, 48 feet of horizontal space.
So is there something between 2 feet and 6 feet?
No,
2 and 8.
2 and 8, between 2 and 8.
Yeah, 2 and 8. There's 6 feet more. Yeah.
But if you went up 4 feet more, so if you went up for a total of 6 feet more.
Would be 8
Right.
times 4, so it's 32 feet.
Right, so 16 on either side.
Correct.
So is that feasible within your footprint?
Well, again, it's feasible, but just understand what that does to the site plan is the detention pond is going to grow north because it's going to become more narrow but longer. So it means we're going to cut down more of the trees to build that detention facility.
Okay, and what about on Park Avenue?
Um,
Do you have the space? Because you have the setback, right?
Yeah, I mean, Park Avenue, we probably have a little bit more flexibility there to increase the height of the berm there.
Okay.
I do have one comment on the Park Avenue side, is that we started with no berm, obviously, and once we start to put the berm in, it went up from one height and then a little bit higher. When we went up higher, we did actually lose quite a bit of parking space to do that.
Okay.
So, it can be done. We just continue to lose the parking space because it starts to get narrow. Yeah, or the site gets pushed back, right? Triangle, so.
Yeah, but you only have so much room to put, the site gets much narrower towards, yeah,
Because of the
right.
triangle.
There's no more space for the whole building to go back in.
Got it, okay.
Where was this? fence going to be, the 8-foot fence that?
On the west.
Was that going to be on the west? Was that going to be on top of the berm?
No.
No, that was in
No.
lieu
It's
of a
gonna be
higher
little-
berm.
Right, because otherwise we would have to, I think that we would have to go into the neighbor's property, or we would put the fence much further east on the property.
Can you put a fence on the
And
berm?
so that's
Or
another
can't you fence on the
question,
berm?
just in terms of something to
don't
consider
think you want a
that takes
fence
up
on the
less
berm 'cause
space.
you've got
At least If you had an
landscaping.
8-foot fence, again, you're talking about height on a 2-foot berm or a 4-foot berm, that again would just be another form of a buffer. So I'm just, in terms of cost or space.
Your microphone.
Sorry, thank you.
I just want to add, too, that we do, we have specified 10-foot evergreens along that entire property line. So, you know, that's install height is 10 feet. And those evergreens grow anywhere from, 40 to 60 feet. So,
Over how long a period of time?
I mean, when they're first planted, over the first 5 years, they're putting on, 2 feet in a year.
Okay.
And those are on top of the current berm. Those are on top of the 2-foot berm. So then we have the fence in between the trees and the property line. So it's kind of the property line, the fence starts on the rise, and then the trees behind that.
Okay.
So the fence is to the west of the trees?
No,
I'm sorry.
It would be to the east.
The
of
fence is to
trees.
the east of the trees?
The fence is closer to the neighbor's properties than
To
the
the west.
trees.
The west.
To the west of the, yes.
But it's sitting on top of, as the berm.
It's on the beginning of the rise of the berm, the fence.
And the trees.
And then the trees are on the top, I took advantage of the height of the berm with the trees.
So here's my question. I mean, we can obviously continue this conversation, and I would want to hear from the neighbors in terms of what's been recommended as the new changes. I suspect I know where they're headed. Do you want to try to reconfigure based on what you've heard so far in terms of one more shot at how do we create a buffer?
Well, I mean, I'm willing to go back and look at the Park Avenue side berm, trying to raise that up a little bit. If they think that we might be able to squeeze a little bit in, then maybe I can. The west side, as Mike pointed out, it's getting bigger, longer, chopping down more trees, more invasive. So I think that side might be difficult to do and even more costly. There was a question that you brought up earlier, Mayor. When you drive by most service centers, you see a door at every bay. We designed this specifically, there's only 2 doors.
Right.
One facing towards the train tracks, no one will ever see it.
Right,
One facing to the north, there is a pretty heavily wooded
right.
set of woods behind us that we've preserved. No one will ever see that. So no one's ever going to see any of the doors. Hopefully no one will ever hear noise, but the building is specifically designed to keep the noise down.
Appreciate it.
And then as far as the other points that you brought up, I think the way the property has been in the past, and the way that it's been the last, say, 3 years, this is an improvement to the neighborhood. It's a lot better than having dilapidated old buildings and everything that's been going on there. So it's just my opinion. That's all.
Yep, appreciate
And
it.
I will hold to my word. If we say that we're going to do something, we're going to do it.
Thank you. Councilman
Thank you.
Blumberg?
So first of all, I want to respond to that last comment and tell you how deeply I appreciate that, just for what that's worth. And I do appreciate it. My understanding is that the principal value of a berm from when we were back dealing with the Highland Park Hospital many, many years ago, the principal value of a berm is to shield against headlights and to provide some noise buffering in addition to the way the building may operate. With the Highland Park Hospital, that's a much taller, much bigger building. So on the scale that we're addressing with your building and the berm you may be able to build, I would be much more comfortable if you're able to come up a foot or two from what you currently have. The trees, as demonstrated at the hospital, do fill in very well which primarily addresses the view of the facility, which I think most of the residents here are concerned with overall. I do want, just to clarify for you, I agree with you this is an improvement over the Greenberg radiology that was there. The residents' concerns are that functionally they've been dealing with vacant property, which is ideal for them. It makes no noise whatsoever. There hasn't, to anybody's knowledge, been anything spilling off of the property in terms of light, materials, anything like that. So yes, it is an improvement, but when you say that, the reaction you're getting is from residents who have had the luxury of being next to a completely abandoned property for about a decade or a little longer.
Understood.
So thank you for your willingness to continue to try to meet these issues and make this work within the confines that it is.
I am going to proceed with hearing public comment. That's what we do at open meetings, and I know these folks aren't here because they don't want to eat dinner or watch whatever's on television tonight. So I appreciate you coming out, and I appreciate your continued advocacy on behalf of your neighborhood. And if you do have comments that are new, unique, different, nothing we've heard before, feel free to line up, and we'll hear from you in 3-minute increments. If you're coming to tell us the same thing you've already said, I think it's pretty clear that we've appreciated your input and have been using it to synthesize this problem. So, Mr. Mueller, if you could spare a few more minutes, I think it's important to continue to hear what the neighbors have to say. Thank you. If anybody wants to speak, come forward now. Please state your name for the record. Aaron, who's keeping track of 3 minutes? Thank you.
Council members, neighbors, my name is Neil Weinfield. I live at 1956. I live at 1956 Cloverdale Ave in Highland Park. What I want to talk about today is what that property will actually be used for. We are not talking merely the parking of cars, nor are we talking merely about the operation of a repair facility. As you know, it is the duty of this commission, council, to make sure and to not approve a plan that is not, it cannot recommend the approval of a plan, the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the special use if it will be detrimental or endangering the public health or safety. I want to talk today about what Mueller actually operates behind his building on Route 41.
This is Mueller.
I got it. This is Mueller's Subaru. What do we have here? This is a photograph taken behind Mueller's operations on 41. You can see that these are drums. These are easily viewable from outside the parking lot. In case Mueller wants to say that he's a good neighbor and doesn't put drums on the land, you can see that these drums are heavily rusted, contain hazardous substances, and have been out there for many years. In case Mr. Mueller, our good neighbor, wants to say that these drums are empty, this is a picture down the middle of that drum, taken right on top of it. And it shows that this drum is laden with oil, hazardous waste, and other substances. I'd like to enter these pictures into the record. Now, Mr. Mueller is presumably a member of the Illinois Automobile Dealers Association. If he reads these regulations, he will note that the location of those drums there and presumably behind the same operations that will occur on Park will violate no less than 15 separate regulations. Now, there may be some sort of ability to approve an operation of some type on Park Avenue, but it is not something that is illegal. The Illinois EPA and the Illinois Automobile Dealers Association don't just draft words because they like typing. They do it to protect the environment. Oil, and especially oil in containers that is open for children to drown in and inhale, contains polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs. These are one of the most toxic substances known to man. They are considered toxic in the parts per billion. That oil has these chemicals and more. and I'm going to enter this into the record. This is Illinois EPA's and the federal ATSDR regulations.
Thank you. What's rude? We represent all of you. We're not here to entertain ourselves. No, we're not doing that. We're going to hear, listen, I appreciate Mr. Weinberg's comments. I would urge him to be in touch with the Illinois EPA with these concerns, obviously.
We can easily shut down that operation, but here's the interesting thing. Why hasn't the city of Highland Park, since you've raised the issue, Councilwoman, and I greatly appreciate everything that's being...
Thank you.
I greatly appreciate the efforts of all of you. This explains why there needs to be a berm. This also explains why the city hasn't enforced against Muller's current operations on Route 41. That's where these pictures are.
You and I could have a fabulous legal conversation about this, and you know as well as I do that this is not within the city's purview. So we will talk about that another time, and I appreciate you bringing your point of view to the floor today. Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate all you're doing. I think that berm will protect, may go some way if this development were to proceed in helping. It needs to be very high.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're not trying to be rude. This is just Open Meetings Act. We're trying to be fair. Thank you. Aaron?
Your mic is on.
Now it's on. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Larry Metnick. I live at 1827 McCraren Road. I just have a couple of miscellaneous comments. They couldn't come up with a model for the lights, but I was wondering, could they explain how the lights on Muller Subaru, Honda, or their used car lot on Skokie, how those lights at night would differ from the lights they want to put on Park Avenue? Because at least we have something to look at. I know it's what it looks like at their existing lots. Okay, no one's ever mentioned snow removal. How are they going to handle 7 acres of snow? They going to remove it? What's going to happen when it melts in the spring with all the spring rains? Okay, as far as traffic, I find it extremely curious that they're ignoring the issue of traffic. The documents that they submitted were totally erroneous and bogus. They described how many vehicles would be going in and out. So if you use that example, if one vehicle went up and down my street 30 separate times, they're describing it as one vehicle. What's going on there? And I submitted an analysis. There's going to be at least 200 trips back and forth between the new facility and Muller Subaru, at least 200. And I don't understand, if you do a traffic study, and let's say it comes out totally unacceptable, does that mean anything for their by right? I mean, what effect does a really unfavorable traffic study have in reality? I'm not quite sure of that. So these are just some thoughts I had, and I appreciate your trying to look out for us as well as you can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Carol Metnick, and I've lived at 1827 McCraren Road for over 40 years now with my husband Larry. The whole Muller project has been a nightmare for the neighbors. Many of us in the neighborhood have either spent a lifetime here or we intend to spend a lifetime here. It is unconscionable that we may have to live next to such a business that opens at 7 o'clock a.m. 6 days a week. I repeat, not 9 a.m., but 7 o'clock in the morning, with lights at full power plus all the accompanying commotion. Remember, during December and January, their business will open before daylight and close after sunset. The point isn't that we can't tolerate the light. It's that our neighborhood will no longer feel residential. There are 87 houses on McCraren Road between Park Avenue and Berkeley. We will be forced to see Muller's backlit sign every time we are at our front yards. Not a pleasant thought. We are very concerned about Mueller downplaying the traffic that their operation will generate. The true magnitude of the increased traffic must be determined. I fear this project will do permanent, irreparable harm to our neighborhood. You could rationalize that Mueller is doing enough to meet the code and maybe make it tolerable. However, the look, feel, and peace of our neighborhood will be forever changed. I urge the mayor and city council members, if you haven't already, to drive down McCraren Road and see if you think a 24-hour-a-day lighted car lot / very busy service facility belongs on the old Greenberg property. While you are there, look at the Keith Security Facility in McCraren and Berkeley. They are an example of an appropriate, responsible development. The ball was dropped by not rezoning the Greenberg property. The mostly underdeveloped land was just sitting there for years. After the senior living proposal was denied, which we greatly appreciated, I was hoping that there would be a formal attempt to rezone the property and correct an historical zoning error. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Mark Mueller, who just recently bought the property, can do himself, his business, and the community much good by being responsive to us, the will of us homeowners. Remember, the homeowners have invested untold millions to live here. Mark Mueller should resell the property to a townhouse or condo developer, and the city should do all it can to facilitate such a transaction. All we are asking is to keep our neighborhood residential and keep the car dealers on Route 41. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask, if you keep applauding, we'll just be here later. You know, I mean, we obviously support what your neighbors are saying, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
No applause necessary. My name is Marty Kinzel, and I live at 1970 McCraren Road, literally one house down from the redevelopment site. Before I get into anything in detail, on the public agenda, it said consideration of. I really, really hope that we consider, not decide this evening. Consider. No decision is required tonight. I hope we consider at least for one more month. I missed a lot of this. I was in traffic. However, as I look at the site, if you walk down the middle of McCraren, you can literally see the site all the way down the block. I drive up and down McCraren Road. I live on it. There's a bus stop at the corner of McCraren and Park Avenue. My request now, I'm not going to get into the environment. I'll leave that to others. However, the berm along Park Avenue, and it's been called a berm, and I kind of suggested at the original meetings at the dealership a year or so ago. I think it can still be brought up to 6 to 8 feet, however, with a retaining wall. I think it's a function of engineering and landscaping, and that along Park Avenue will get them to 8 feet. They can punch up, and there's examples of this throughout the city. You can build it up and put a retaining wall in. And I'm just want to make sure whatever we decide to do that, if it's done in a tasteful way, the neighbors will not lose too much of their property value. There is a serious economic question. Other homes that are near other dealerships, I believe, on the assessment rolls have a 15% market value depreciation. That's real, on top of the other issues. This is, I've spent my life in my house, my largest investment. And I still have one request relative to the sign. Since it's not really a retail area, it would have more of a professional aspect if it had a sign much similar to our signs at the parks. I don't think we need to have, and I don't mean any disrespect to Mr. Muller, I don't think we need to have an emblazoned sign lit up. And I don't even know if it's 24/7. I don't know if that shuts off at 6 at night, but if there's a tasteful sign at the entrance, the only people going in and out are vendors and employees. I'm trying to make the best out of this situation. And conversely, I did hear that there are some threats, well, we can just build this, we can build that, we can go and just do it by right. Well, I'm not an attorney, but I do understand the concept of eminent domain. So the city has an option as well, should it get to this. I'm just trying to have, everyone get along as much as possible with the minimum of pain and suffering by the neighbors and me. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the applicant's time.
Hi. My name is Brittany. I'm on Cloverdale, Park in Cloverdale.
Brittany, I think they need your last name.
Oh, Wilco, W-I-L.
Thank you.
I have two little kids, like 9 and 6, and I know like our neighborhood is full of children, and it's like so nice because of that. And they, run around the neighborhood, and it's obviously scares me to have something come in and with the traffic and all that, but also the chemicals. I don't know if this was brought up, but all that, the chemicals that are then going to be into the soil and into the air, and has any study been done on what that impact looks like for this neighborhood?
You'll have to talk to the applicant.
Has any research been done on what impact this will have environmentally on the neighborhood? Well, I cannot believe that. Like, I can't even, I thought I was coming in here being like dumbfounded. Like, I don't even have words for that, because that to me is the most important thing. You hear about all the concerns with chemicals now, and we pay a lot of money to live here, and for that not to environmentally even be considered is beyond me. Shocked. No? So, sitting here, with looks like, no, we've not even thought about that, deeply concerned.
This is not my area of expertise,
Okay.
but there are regulations in terms of space.
I know, but like
and-
what's going to be leached into, they're
Well, they're
draining
not-
this into our.
It's not supposed to go into the ground at all.
Okay, supposed to, but like.
No, right, they're not using.
So how do they know?
Oh, time out. So there are regulations around operations of business. People aren't just free-for-all throwing
Okay.
stuff all over the place. And car dealers are required under Illinois state law to dispose of specific compounds in a specific way. Mr. Weinberg was discussing his concern earlier about the drums, but I'm just telling you, they're not just going to be pouring it out on the ground and best of luck all of
I
you
know,
with your
it's
groundwater.
scary to think about something happens, something spills, it's now in the air, right next to where my children walk every day. And like, has it been considered to move this idea somewhere else? I know these might be silly questions to people, but it's just, doesn't seem like the right fit. I know business talking, maybe it is, but it just doesn't feel right in Highland Park and in Sherwood Forest, where there's the best neighborhood of kids, and we're all just moving here because of that, Everyone's moved here because of that feeling. I don't know. It's just to consider.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jacqueline Lotsoff. I live at 2027 Partridge Lane. I'm from Highland Park. I chose to have my family live back here in Highland Park. I moved to Sherwood Forest a couple years ago, and I'm also a realtor with Compass. 95% of my business is here in Highland Park. I have spent the majority of my career fighting for this town and showing all of these first-time home buyers why they should move here and why they should invest their dollars in this community. When there were talks about creating this large school years ago, that was one of the biggest points of contention, where everybody was calling me saying, maybe we should look at other towns. And here I am fighting for Highland Park. Now what happened in Highland Park this last summer, again, another sticking point. People are calling me, should we be moving here? What's your opinion? And now again, here we are bringing up another very heated topic of why Highland Park should be sought out. And this is in my own backyard. Of course, it's very personal to me. I live in Highland Park, and I do 95% of my business here, supporting this community and trying to bring first-time homebuyers in to support downtown Highland Park and all the stores, and not have shops be closing and not have businesses close. And if something like this comes into our town, I do fear that this is going to be another reason for buyers to look to other communities. So I think that's something that everybody should keep in mind, that there's only so much that us realtors can do to try to support everybody's property values and help everybody move up. If people are looking to downsize and leave, this is something you need to also be concerned about. It's not just first-time homebuyers moving in, it's people that have lived here for 30, 40, 60 years. Where are your property values going to go if you approve something like this?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Scott, 1964 Cloverdale. So what I want to talk about is the pollution associated with the special use. My background is a PhD in materials chemistry. If you look at the car waxes, paint strippers, all this is going to provide chemicals which are going to be on top of the cars. Many of the additives that they've added to paint are forever chemicals. That's also in the car waxes to keep water from beating up. These forever chemicals are going to come off in the car wash that was approved by the Design Plan Commission, and it's going to go and start dripping onto the paved areas. That's going to accumulate. When it rains, it's going to then wash into the city system. If you look at the levels of forever chemicals, we're talking part per trillion. So if you start getting a tenth of a drop, tenths of a milligrams, contaminate water levels to over 20,000 gallons of water per drop. So we're looking at incredibly small levels that are going to accumulate. When the rain hits, it's going to wash off. The water on the side, according to the study, is already contaminated with chlorinated volatile organic chemicals existing from previous sites. That's then going to get combined. The water flows in the direction toward the neighborhood at a level that's consistent with basements and sump pumps. We are literally poisoning the neighbors currently with the contaminated site. The addition of the paved areas are the cars that are going to go through, rip off all the forever chemicals and be put into are then going to be channeled either into our storm sewer system, or they're going to be channeled underneath in the existing groundwater that flows directly into the neighbors at levels consistent with their basements. This is a hazardous waste site. There are pictures of the chemicals. This is not consistent with any kind of best practice. Additionally, when you start looking at the doors, why is a chemical facility that does cars and generates pollution allowed to simply open the doors and vent it with fans? Staying with the industry I know, which is the chemical industry, they used to do that with Lake Michigan. You would open it up, you dump all your waste in Lake Michigan because it's Lake Michigan. Chemical factories are next to bodies of water for a reason, because people dump stuff into it. When did they stop? When city councils and people like this in the community said enough is enough, we need to protect our community. We have school bus stops, we have residents that this is directly next to. We're going to be putting volatile organic chemicals, and it's going to be blowing out into the neighborhoods with the fans on a warm day when people are outside. This can only be enforced with what? People walking on the railroad tracks, crossing over to take pictures, so then our residents are going to put their lives at stake in order to take images of this. This is a major problem, and there are solutions for it. Put in double doors and have the building air conditioned. Why this building gets to vent out its toxic waste to the community is a function of the people on the council and local rules not providing this. This is something that can be stopped at our level and residents' health being protected. Communities next to hazardous waste sites have significantly higher cases of asthma, COPD, and cancer rates. This is a hazardous waste site. Put in rules such as double doors in order to prevent it.
But with air conditioning, won't they still be venting out?
No, because you put HEPA filtration on the air conditioning system.
Okay.
And you're going to control it as opposed to a massive door, which is going to allow it out constantly. You would have a much smaller amount.
Thank you.
Mayor, respectfully, I want to point out, this is not the special use. That's the permitted use.
But the special use is the parking lot.
Right.
That's correct.
And that's what's going to have the forever chemicals. That's going to have additional chemicals where they clean parts. It's going to come off. It's going to drip. It's going to accumulate and be
I understand that,
transferred.
but you were discussing the building and the use of the doors and the ventilation, which is part of the permitted use.
Right, but in addition to that, I was also discussing the chemical contamination to the local community from the special use, which will be spewing
forever chemicals into the neighborhoods, into the groundwater, into the system around it. So simply the special use itself, the cars going in and off, because we're talking putting hundreds of cars there, how many times a car gets washed every time before you drive it? And that's going to go through, drip out the chemicals. New cars are going to have higher level of waxes. They're also going to have newer paints designed with lower VOCs, which have forever chemicals added to it. That's going to come off especially early in the early ones.
Understood.
It's a source of contamination for the special use.
I hear you. Thank you.
Councilmember Stone,
Yeah, one more question.
turn on your microphone.
It's on. So if that, if the additional parking is not permitted, there's still some parking that is associated with the building itself. Having a smaller parking lot, is that helpful?
It would, it's going to catch it in the dirt as opposed to going directly to the groundwater. If you look at the site currently, when they dug samples on it, they came out with green soils from chlorinated volatile organic chemicals. So the chemicals are going to go somewhere. The question is, if you trap them there, then they're going to be less likely to go into the residential neighborhood because you're going to trap them as opposed to dropping down to the lower surface water. And by reducing the amount of cars on there, you're going to reduce the total concentration of them because you're not going to be just dripping them all in this one area that you're parking all these new cars in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael Goldberg. I live at 1745 Sherwood. I'm a professor of medicine at the University of Chicago. I was former head of gastroenterology at North Shore University Healthcare and vice chairman of medicine. Since July 4th, I've seen an uptick in GI disorders and also in anxiety-related GI disorders. I think the last thing anybody in this community needs is anything that increases anxiety. And if anything can be done to decrease the anxiety about this project, it would be welcome. Whether it's the noise causing anxiety, whether it's people afraid for their kids, getting hit by a car that's going down the street, or whether it's the anxiety caused by the pollution. And that's a real anxiety. Those pictures that you saw, that you showed, are very disturbing. I had NIH grants at one time to study cancer, and I studied cancer for over 20 years of the colon. And there's no doubt that aromatic hydrocarbons, like you showed over there, cause colon cancer. We showed a direct link. So, if you want Highland Park Hospital to get busier with colonoscopies, go ahead. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
My name is Howard Tater. I was a former member of the Plan Commission, so it's interesting to be on this side of the table as opposed to your side of the table. Three things. I live at 1849 Cloverdale. First is this. At one time, Muller had a Nissan dealership on 41. It's no longer there. I think it's Volkswagen now, but it's not Nissan. I think you need to give consideration of what happens when and if they're no longer a Subaru. Can they deal with trucks at that site that they're now requesting to use for the Subaru dealership and repair? In other words, where do you draw the line? Can you draw the line when it comes to how it's going to be used? Secondly, right now in the property that we'll refer to it merely as Greenberg, it's substantially grass, and I think it always has been, except for the building towards the rear. And so water could easily percolate. How is water going to percolate when you now have a paved property dealing with vehicles going back and forth. Where is that water going to go? Thirdly, I think you need to give consideration now to what will happen in the future, and that is consideration of Phase 1 and Phase 2 studies when it comes to contamination of soil. And how will that Phase 1 and Phase 2 study requirement for that property maybe spill over to adjoining neighbors because of seepage? And will they have to go through the laborious and costly act of doing Phase 1 and Phase 2 studies that might seemingly be only the requirement of the dealership? Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me speak, Mayor and esteemed council members. My name is Leon Benson. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I live at 1728 Sunnyside, which is about 2 or 3 blocks away from this proposal. This is the first time I've gone to a meeting about this, and I've heard about it from my patients and all the neighbors in the area, and it is astounding to me to listen to this discussion. Because anyone who's walked down the street, and I've lived in the neighborhood for 25 years, can tell in an instant, you can't put lipstick on this pig. You can't make this site something that fits into the neighborhood because it has been zoned incorrectly. And whatever history has been there and however many needles have accumulated in the buildings that have fallen down from Greenberg Radiology and the North Shore buying the property and then selling it, and that property turning over. Right now, its best use is for the deer that live there, unless you're going to build homes there. It's just zoned wrong. So how in the world could you make this square peg fit in the round hole? You can have 1,000 more meetings on this subject, and you're never going to get the neighborhood behind this because it doesn't work. It's impossible. You're trying to make something happen that can't be done. Good luck on your meetings, and if I were involved in this business, and I'm involved in running a business, a private business, a medical practice, yeah, I'd stop because you're just throwing good money down a hole, like a hole in the ocean for your boat, because you're never going to make this work because it can't be done. You can't control the traffic that's already sort of out of control over those train tracks. You can't take this property that is nestled amongst all the homes that are literally being built there now and make it somehow fit. Yeah, I'm going to buy a house in a residential neighborhood, but don't mind this giant car dealership repair center that we've put there. And it's like, well, how the heck did that happen? Well, they were going to put a cannabis store and an airport and an oil refinery, but this was the best we could do. So it just is amazing to me how much energy and effort has been put into this, and it's like you can't make 2 + 2 = 5. That's my comment. And I would say I'm also been sort of surprised, having been in the audience here for the last hour or so, that from what I can understand, the chief counsel representing the car dealership left because he had another meeting. Oh, but you guys have nothing else to do. That's a bad sign. That's not a great good faith negotiation on part of the business. No, you have all the people in the neighborhood who are beside themselves with their property values and their enjoyment going into the garbage because of this project. But the lawyer has something more important to do. That's just a red flag. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Come on. Thank you.
Michael Ross, 1624 Park Avenue West, about a block down from this project. The last 2 gentlemen pretty much sold my thunder. That seems to be happening the last couple of times that I've been up here. But, I'd like to start off by saying that, I don't think Mueller respected the council with not having the answers that were asked for by the council in the last meeting. And if they don't respect the council, how are they going to respect the neighborhood? So that's a bad sign. As far as the berm, a larger berm would definitely help. But I have to say, I look out at all these people here. No one wants this thing. There's not one person in here besides the Mueller people that want this. You guys are supposed to represent us. Something that I learned when I was a child, from my parents, from my teachers, I heard it over and over, and hear it still yet today. Two wrongs do not make a right. Just because this is zoned wrong, you can't make it right by putting Muller on this property. And I'm sorry, I know that it's zoned and it's supposedly a permitted use. Look again. These people wouldn't permit it. I know you guys have your rules, but I think you ought to look at changing them. A couple of other things. The lighting. The lights are going to be, they're not going to be good for the neighborhood. I don't understand, if you go to the back of Muller Places now, the two-car showrooms on 41, there are no lights behind there, and they park cars. What do they need to put it in our neighborhood for? If they're so concerned about security, hire a security firm to patrol it if you guys have to do this. I mentioned the berm. Berm would help a lot. Traffic study, it needs to be done. They have not been honest with what they say the traffic is going to be. We've heard, when we went back to the Planning and Development Committee the first time, I think it was Mr. Kim, who said, it's going to be 65 trips a day or 65 cars a day. Now we're down to 24 or 25? Who do we believe? I don't know, my notes are all in disarray at this point in time because everybody's pretty much said everything, but again, with the water in the retention pond, if there's just a foot of water in there, don't tell me that a kid can't drown in there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Luke Knox. I live at 1584 Robin Hood Place. Man, I feel like I'm really late to this game. I'm not even as close as a lot of you are to this place, but I don't really approve of it as a neighbor. So let me tell you a story. 1989, August, summer of 1989. I got home from a Boy Scout trip. Got up that morning. I had a paper out. I was 12 years old, 13 years old. My mom decided to help me. I finished my half. I'm crossing the street. Next thing I hear is, next thing I remember, I get up and I'm running into my neighbor's yard screaming because I just got hit by a car. I would hate for my daughter Quinn, 9, or my daughter Piper, 6, or all the other friends of my kids that live on McCraren, the Evelyns, the Audreys, the Michaels. That doesn't even name half of the kids, have to experience what I experienced. And I know we've lost a lot this summer, or even the parents have to deal with that. What I put my mom through and my parents just because of that one accident, it's not worth it. And if there's no traffic study, wow, that really boggles my mind, because what's on paper is not what's in reality. You know, I know that I read kind of briefly that, oh, we're not going to have big semi-trucks cross over onto Park. Okay, well, what if they do? What's the consequence? I understand that there will be no right-hand turns out of the facility. Okay, you think people are going to listen and watch a stop sign or a sign? You are a fool for thinking that, because at the corner of Berkeley and McCraren, people run that stop sign all day long. People cut through Arbor and Robin Hood just so they don't have to go to that stop sign. There really needs to be a stop sign at the corner of my house, and I haven't even tackled that. This is bad, really bad. You can throw all the EPA stuff and the trees and the berm. You hit a kid, you won't forget it. You won't forget it at all. You won't.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Judd Hirschfeld. I live on 1603 Little John Court. Just a question that I've been listening to everybody here. What can we do to stop this from happening? Is there anything we can do just to stop this from happening? I mean, I've heard what they've had to say, and I completely agree with what everybody's saying. I have 3 kids. They ride their bikes down the streets. It scares me with the traffic and how fast the cars go, and seeing what goes on a daily basis, and what would happen if this establishment was put up, how much more dangerous it would be for my kids. But what can we do to prevent this from happening? Is there anything we can do as residents or as your council, or what can we do? That's just my question.
You're advocating, and I appreciate it. We've been hearing from the neighbors for months, both via email, both via presentation. You're walking away while I'm talking, but that's okay. I thought that was a conversation we were having.
No, I'm sorry.
And I'm a big fan of advocacy, so I just, that's basically what you're doing. You elected us to represent you. Obviously, there are certain constraints within the law, but certainly special use permit consideration, we are here having that conversation. So, I'm not being facetious. I am a parent. I started in my public career asking for a stop sign. So I'm going to tell you how to get a stop sign on your street. And when I came, they said, it doesn't meet the warrants. It doesn't fit the law. And I didn't stop, and I got my stop sign. That's how I got here. So thank you for being here. I don't know what the outcome of my peers will be. We will have that conversation momentarily. But appreciate you coming out tonight, and we share your concerns, obviously.
Can I ask one other question?
Sir.
So I have plenty of time. So there's the special use.
Right.
And then there's just an actual permit as well.
Right.
So if you don't approve of the special use, it could be put up regardless.
The
Part of it.
service building.
The service building. Got it. Okay. I guess I wasn't clear on everything that would be put
No,
up.
it's a complex project, and
Yeah, it
there's
is a
been a lot of conversation, and there's a lot of, there are a lot of pieces to what people are concerned about, and we appreciate it.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
That's the question that I led off with.
Right.
If it were my neighborhood, I wouldn't want it either. That was asked of us at the last meeting, and that's why I point out that we have a dilemma. We have some concessions. Fortunately, Mr. Mueller has indicated that what he has agreed to so far, and he's willing to go a little bit further, he will continue to do even if we disapprove of the special use permit. But the only hold we have to assure compliance with the policy requirements that we're putting is through the special use permit. There are engineering obligations he has to meet. There are state and federal regulations he has to meet. As a car dealer, he is inspected, he's currently inspected, and has to meet those regulations. I don't know the answer to the question, how could we prevent this in its entirety?
Fair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Charles Brejos. I also was on the Traffic Calming Commission. I've been a resident since 1995. I live at 1630 Cloverdale. I developed the Burkdale re-subdivision on the northwest quadrant of Berkeley and Cloverdale. When I went to the traffic calming meetings, and while this is all happening with the sewer expansion or renovation for the stormwater because of the rules changing in residential, they told me, well, we looked at many ways to handle traffic situations on Berkeley. What happens on Berkeley happens on Park. It's a racetrack. But the thing that struck me the most, and I just wanted to point out, is one very shortly thing, is that the commission said that by putting more stop signs only leads people to false sense of security. Okay? And we're by the parks. Cloverdale Park is accessible from Eastwood as it is from Cloverdale, as it is from other side streets. And that's an issue. And I've heard a lot of, I just want to qualify this to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because I hear some hearsay numbers, count numbers that come from where? And that's why I'm calling them hearsay. We all know what that means. You have a franchise service repair business. It's monogrammed and stamped with a factory, a Subaru, a GM, a Mercedes-Benz. Then you have a repair shop. If you're going after the repair business, it's a different dynamic. You open the doors to many more avenues of getting business in. You mentioned you have a car wash. I haven't been into all the meetings, excuse me, but I've been to, I think, the last 3, maybe of the 4. I have heard no numbers on what this car wash does. I've heard no numbers of what is the dentless, if I'm correcting this wrong, because it isn't a paint shop, but the dentless is a business of turns, fast turns. And turns meaning bringing somebody in, a customer, fixing his car, and turning it. Versus, as they were saying, there are some service records and things that are more long-term because they're older, they take more hours, so on and so forth. So all these numbers, to me, seem to be missing. Missing and most importantly in a traffic count. But what I do know about the car business, and I know a lot of people that are car dealers, and trust me, that they have very succinct numbers on how many Subarus people are coming in day and booking. And it makes no sense at all to me how the idea, and it's simply an idea that I don't think, if it is, it'd be the first time ever modeled, that you're now taking and valet parking these cars from a place that has service repair space for their Subarus. Now, if you're going for repairs, we don't know what the numbers are because you may have the best oil change or you may have the best carburation cleaners or the best interiors, but I think all these numbers really have to be quantified and looked at. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Roger Wilk. I live at 1822 McCraren. I've lived there for 54 years. I've heard many, many proposals over the last 50 years of what to do with that property north of Park Avenue. This happens to be the worst. I cannot believe what this dealership would bring in value to our neighborhood. We have 80 or 100 people sitting here. If someone could raise their hand and tell me that this is going to add value to the biggest single investment any one of us has made in our lifetime, and it's going to be a real simple equation. If that thing gets built, our property values are going to go down. As the realtor mentioned, it's going to be hard to sell property in our neighborhood. So we have a nice equation. Our property values go down, but our taxes go up because that's what the city council and the school board and the rest of the taxing bodies do. So we have both ends of the sword that are stuck right in our heart. Now, I have a suggestion to the city council. Mueller came here in good faith. They're honest businessmen, and they deserve to make a living. But they made a serious error in purchasing this property. Give them their money back and their expenses. Take over the piece of property and do it the right way. Rezone it. That's the whole problem. It's been around for 50 years. Rezone the damn property and then put it out for bids for developers who will put in something that enhances the value of our neighborhood, not detracts from it. And I can tell you, if traffic, pollution, light diffusion, environmental, other aspects don't catch somebody's attention, I don't know what will. I thank you all, and I thank Mueller for trying to keep the business in the city of Highland Park. We need business in Highland Park, just not in our backyard.
We don't have the money. They didn't buy it from us. They bought it from another private owner. I didn't know if you wanted to share your thoughts on.
Sure. So there are a couple of things that have been raised. First of all, rezoning it at this point is not going to have an impact on the development of the property that's currently proposed, and I've explained that previously. The past, unfortunately, is past, but historically, the city does not rezone individual properties just because they're vacant. We rezone when either a private enterprise or private individual asks us with respect to a project to rezone it. That, for instance, is why Trammell Crow sought to have this piece of property rezoned in conjunction with a project. The property owner has rights as well, and rezoning in response to nothing can lead to litigation, which is quite expensive. The property has been zoned as it is for many administrations prior to our time, and historically, rezoning in a vacant piece of property is not something that the city does. The idea of purchasing this requires that the seller, which would be Mueller, would cooperate with that on the one hand, and secondly, it would be completely inconsistent with what the city does. The expenditure of taxpayer dollars has to also reflect all of your fellow Highland Parkers who do not face this issue. So purchasing of the property is not a matter of city infrastructure.
Please go ahead.
My name's David Piacenza. I live at 2075 Grange. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make any of the first meetings, so this is my first one. So I have a couple of concerns with the land elevation and the water drainage. When you stand on Park Avenue and you look at this property, you see all the flat land. And that's where I initially thought the property was going to be. But at the end of that property, if you take a look at it, the land elevation goes up 10, 15 feet. Behind my property, it goes up even higher because there is a little drainage area back there. And at the end of that property, when you get towards the end of the Grange, it tapers back down, and it's basically swampland. Where that land starts going up in elevation 10, 15 feet, is all that dirt just going to get cleared out of there? Or, because I saw the blueprint of the parking area and it didn't show anything about elevation. So is the parking in the back going to be at the same elevation, or are they just going to leave that dirt there and kind of pave a drive going up?
It's for the applicants to answer.
Because there is a lot of land, there is a lot of earth back there to move. I mean, it's not just one or two trucks, but that's up to them.
Okay.
But where is all this water going to go when that whole back area is paved, whether it's higher or lower? We already have a huge problem on Grange, at the end of Grange. There are two culvers at the end of this property where that swampland pretty much is. It goes underneath the tracks, and it's my understanding it goes to underneath the Target parking lot. We've all lived in Highland Park long enough to see when we get a heavy rain, that water comes clear into 41. Mueller should know this. It's happened on their property. So you can't add water to a glass of water that's already full. So I'd like you to take that into consideration too, because I heard a little bit about a retention pond and it's going to dry up fast. It's not going to dry up fast. And as a matter of fact, it's probably going to be swampland most of the time, especially if it's dug down a little bit, because the water has no place to go. So that's going to bring a lot of insects, bugs, mosquitoes, diseases, that sort of stuff. So I'd like you to take that in consideration, along with the elevation. Is the elevation going to remain level?
You want me to answer the question?
Sure, but you need to come over by the microphone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe there were two questions in his statements. The first being the elevation of the land. He is correct. As the property goes further north, it does rise up. In the original proposal, when as the site was laid out, we were kind of leaving that area alone, leaving that high ground in place. But as I've explained, as the site is pushed, we've cut into that, which generated more cut for us to be able to have to balance the site. So that's why it's kind of raised up a little bit. Generally, as you look at the site as we've developing it, it will be generally flat.
Okay.
The areas around it where we're not disturbing trees, we're going to generally leave as is. Relative to the question about detention, I mean, we have submitted these plans to the Public Works Department. I have had conversations with them. I believe generally they're in concurrence with what we're proposing. Our water is not, and I think I've made this testimony before, our water is not directed to the west. It's not directed to the south. It is directed to the railroad ditch, where it drains down the railroad ditch through the culverts that go under the railroad tracks. He is correct. Route 41 does flood. It's floodplain. So our basin, which is another component of why the basin is a little larger, is we have to account for that, and we're providing a zero release effect, meaning that when our basin is below the flood elevation of the downstream receiving area, we're not releasing any water, which means as the water runs into our site, we're storing all of it. So again, you know, I've been practicing engineering for 30 years. I'm fairly confident that this site will work as intended and not cause problems to the adjacent property owners.
Okay, thank you.
Deidre Gold, 1581 Park Avenue West. I will save my bio for later in my remarks, but because I'm here to speak as a homeowner in the area. We're one of the houses that is closest to this development. My next door neighbor is the closest and is only 30 feet away on the west side. This is a huge change to her property, to our property, and I think the west side needs particular focus because we will bear the full brunt of a lot of this, much closer than even the Park Avenue side, and a berm probably doesn't work there. I'll give you that. So what else can we do? What else has been done? In other communities, as I've testified at the PDC and other places, they have insisted on substantial 200-foot dense foliage to be planted of mature plantings. We're already heading down the path of putting in, but bushes, arborvitae, instead of evergreen trees here, which doesn't work. It's not the same. Not the same maturity, not the same height, not the same screening. With a proposal that there be a fee in lieu paid, which does nothing to benefit us as the residents who are bearing the brunt of this. Rather, it may benefit the city as a technical exception waiver than being granted. I'd like to talk about a couple other things. The harm to the neighborhood is indisputable in terms of quiet enjoyment and property values. And as someone else testified, and as we'd be happy to provide supplementally, the houses around Polyacura have a permanent notation in their tax records that shows a decrement in the value of those properties because of a noxious use, I think it's what it says. We'd be happy to provide screenshots of that. I was astonished at the finding out of the city staff that said, nope, no diminution of value, no challenge to quiet enjoyment. The city cannot make a finding like that without evidence to support it. There is no evidence to support that. The applicant has suggested that maybe it's up to the city or up to the residents to provide contrary evidence on things like the traffic study. That's a ridiculous standard. It's the applicant's burden. It's the city's determination to find evidence as to whether the standards are being met, and I think a number of them, as some of the council members have said, are not being met. Finally, I'd make the offer and open testimony here to Mr. Mueller, Mr. Kim, anyone else. I think, we'd be happy to sit down with anyone from your organization to try to figure out some solutions, improvements to the west side buffer for sure, and to get some real facts about the detention pond. We have not been approached about that. We'd love to be part of the committee that tries to solve things instead of always having to be reactive here in the space of only a couple days. And I would cite that this neighborhood is very open to people who are good neighbors. I mean, the one other non-conforming property, which is the office building that's close to us at 1550 Park Avenue, they get Highland Park, they get being a part of a neighborhood. They held an ice cream social. They have reassured neighbors that they want to be part of the community and want to be respectful. I wish I felt that from other people. Finally, if you'll bear with me, there was a lot of talk about threats of litigation from the applicant or the danger to the city of litigation and the cost of that. And obviously, as a taxpayer, I care about that. I'm also a lawyer for 40 years and have been a business executive for 40 years. And I would just underscore what someone else said, which is we paid substantial amounts for our property too, and we have an economic interest, and there could equally be a taking of our property through this action. So I think the city just needs to take that into consideration as a part of the mix here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name's Larry Hillman. I live at 1945 Sunnyside. Didn't plan to speak, but I just want to fact check a couple things and then put a suggestion out there. First of all, when we were on the Plan Commission, when I was on Plan Commission, we rezoned 750 acres of Highland Park without a proposal for it for PU, if you recall.
That wasn't individual pieces of property.
They
That
were-
was part of a master planning process.
No, it wasn't part of the master planning process.
Or a general planning process.
It was a general planning process, but we did that. So it's happened, and it'll happen again. The second thing is that the city has purchased properties proposed for development and put them into a different purpose. For example, 1550 Park Avenue was originally proposed to be a development, and the city bought it, and it was going to be a health center, if I recall correctly. The city bought that property and owned it, and then resold it for the purpose that it's in use for now.
You're talking about the rec center?
No, on Park Avenue, right across the street from this property.
I'm not aware of that.
That property was bought by, when Pierce was mayor.
Well,
And, I mean, it goes long, I mean, it's still City of Highland Park, it may be a long time ago. Another one is the Shap property, which is now Highland Park Country Club. The Shaps bought that for redevelopment. The city didn't want that development to take place. They thought it was too dense. The city bought it, and it's a country club. So I don't think those are options that have never been pursued in the past. And the last thing is, there's an easy solution to this, I think. And I think the Muellers would probably love it too. And that is if the city can locate a property on the 41 corridor, they'd prefer the visibility, I would think, prefer the access, and do a swap. It may require a lot of work, but the Cairo Animal Hospital is sort of for sale, and the property next to it as well. It's like 9 acres.
Also abutting the neighborhood.
No, not at all.
Yes, actually, the neighborhood that Ray Geraci used to live in is.
The Cairo, yeah.
Cairo Animal Hospital is on the,
It's on Park Avenue.
No, it's not. It's on 41, just west of where Starbucks, it's right next to the Benoni McCogney property.
You're thinking of the old Cone.
Cairo Animal Hospital, oh, I'm sorry, they did move to Park Avenue, you're right.
Right.
The old Cairo Animal Hospital, showing my age, is on 41, kind of between the Smirsky property and where the Starbucks and Citibank place is. I mean, if the city got together and really made an effort, they could probably find a property and do a land swap. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Come on, aren't you guys hungry? Let's wrap this up. Go ahead. Shelley, let's hear from you, buddy.
I didn't intend to speak at all tonight, but I kind of want to add on to what he just mentioned. Councilman Blumberg mentioned 1880 Cloverdale Avenue, Shell Langer. Councilman Blumberg mentioned that the city does not buy properties. That's not true. You bought a Highland Park movie theater. You bought 2 homes next to a library for expansion. The park bought part of the Highland Park Country Club. So that's not entirely true. Number 2, you mentioned that we're not in the business of doing zoning. So if you can change zoning, we've got a problem that never ends, don't we? If it's not a nursing home, it'll be a car dealership and whatever comes down the road next. How does this problem stop? You have the ability to change the zoning, or someone does. That, and additionally, is this the only property available in Highland Park? I didn't know we were so filled with such no land over here. You go on 41 where Muller has many dealerships, beautiful dealerships. You have car lots right next door sitting empty. They've got bays, they've got parking, and it's sitting empty. You can certainly do repairs over there and storage of cars. Why is this property so important up here on Park Avenue? That's my question. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the neighborhood. He knows it, and everybody here knows it, and you know it as well. Nobody up here would want to have that car dealership sitting next to them, next to their house. But you're stuck with it because of zoning. Now, this is not his problem. This is not his fault. The law said he could build this thing here, so he buys a property on a great deal for a property that size. He says, let's build a dealership. You could have built probably 20 townhomes over there at 5 times the price of that property, but it never happened. The point is, this application is wrong, no different than the application of the strips on 41 that belong, the parking, the strips.
the rumble strip.
The rumble strip that have been
I'm
up
with
for
you on the
2.5
rumble
years.
strips
But that's
all
been there
day
for
long.
2.5 years, and it took 2.5 years to get rid of it. This property, you don't know what could happen in the future if Mueller says, you know, we're closing this place down. It's for sale. What's next? That's where I'm at.
I understand your frustration. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming. Thank you. Anybody else? Going once, going twice?
Well, I just want to reiterate really quickly that point that, let's say Mueller, it'd be nice.
If you want to talk, I'm sorry, just, you got to talk, but,
I
yeah.
just want to reiterate the.
Please reiterate your name, because our poor clerk is keeping
Okay,
track of all
Brittany.
this.
Oh, okay, cool. I just want to reiterate the point I made earlier about if there is any way to get the chemical, study or what's going on with that. And also, with the point that he just made about if it does get built, what's next? Because the city, can make those, regulations, I guess you would say, to do that before, so we don't ever run into an issue like this again, would be very helpful. And,
Okay, thank you. I think we're at a point where we need to just sort of call the question and see where we are with all of this. The question is consideration of a Plan and Design Commission recommendation. So Marcus, I'm looking at you. Is this to recommend drafting? Is this to, what action are you looking for this motion to include? Are you wanting to?
Yeah, my understanding from Mr. Mueller was that he was willing to consider increasing the berm. If he's willing to do that, I'd like to come back and hear how much he's willing to increase it so that we can incorporate that language. I would also ask, if we're going to do that, if you would consider not illuminating the sign. You're not really in a place where you're advertising to what I think you're going to acknowledge is your principal customer base, if you would consider those two things.
Could I have a small point of
So I'd like to
clarification?
come back and hear that before we actually draft a motion and vote on it.
As a point of clarification, if we do raise the berm, it obviously affects the site.
Yeah.
And it affects the parking and the building layout, which hopefully you could recognize. Then,
I do.
if that does happen, then does it go back to the PDC or does it come back to you?
Maybe we should see first if
Does
we
it have to go back to the PDC if they can?
tell them they don't want it to go back.
That's correct. You can. We can have it come back to us directly. We don't have to go through.
All those steps again.
Thank you for raising that, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So if we could.
So that's the question, though, is,
Continue it.
do you have an interest in coming back with a reconfiguration? I'm asking the applicant. If you guys can't answer the question, then we'll just go home, but.
Maybe not.
Just have a question, because I was talking to our engineer while neighbors were, giving their
Speaking.
comments.
Sure.
According to him looking at it without actually doing the math, there's no space towards the west of the property where we could raise the berm.
Okay.
He said on the south side towards the Park Avenue, he thinks there's about a foot he could raise, but I'm going to lose about 10 parking spaces. Rough calculation, not to, so here's my
So
question.
it sounds like your answer is not really, like you
Yeah,
can't
so
really.
if we do raise that by a foot, does that make a difference? That's our
No.
question. Okay,
Right.
so then, because if for us to raise them more, then we're gonna lose more parking spaces because we can't push the building any further back, then what's the point of the special use permit if I'm gonna lose another 30, 40 parking storage spaces?
Okay.
Right? You see the dilemma? We want to work with
Yeah.
the city and the neighbor, but then we're gonna lose the purpose of trying to get the SCP.
Got it. Okay.
So, I mean, we don't mind going back and coming back with raising another foot or maybe raising
No,
another
I
6
think
inches
it's a
here and
matter
there,
of, I
but
mean, you guys, everybody has put so much time into
Yeah,
this
it's just that if
conversation.
you're not gonna
If
get
it's
the
not a
6
significant change, then I don't see a real need to put this off and come back again. Mr. Mueller, did you want to add, or you're just here to back up?
going to help hear you.
Okay, okay.
We are definitely willing to go look at this, as I said before, the south berm. The west side, there isn't a lot we can do because we're starting to chop trees down again. We're encroaching farther north. So if we have to, we're just doing more work to the property then.
Okay.
So I'm definitely willing to look at the south side, which is what we originally said.
I think the issue, though, frankly, is on the west and the proximity to everything.
Is it crazy to say why not put up a 12?
I don't,
I'm sorry, I don't mean,
Yeah.
It's just that it sounds like the expense, the space that it's costing you is crazy. And it's also, you know, if we're looking for a buffer.
I mean, I don't know the difference between the 6 proposed and go, if you're thinking about a view from the top floor of a house, it's not going to make a difference. And the berm with the 10-foot trees is providing more than what a 12-foot fence would provide.
I think we're going to call the question then. I think we're just going to move on. I don't sense there's opportunity for significant change that would make the difference that we're seeking. And so to that end, I'm seeking a motion on number 3.
Mayor,
Yeah.
if I may, to your earlier question, if the general consensus of the committee is not to continue and to direct a resolution tonight, whether to deny or approve, if the direction is to deny, I would suggest that the motion's language be a motion to direct Corporation Counsel to draft a resolution to deny the application based on the standards of the special use.
Okay.
If it is to approve, I would reflect that same language. It would be a motion to
approve based on the standards.
based on the standards, and that's kind of the key thing that has to be in there.
Sounds good. Seeking that motion. One way or the other. Or we can.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, thanks.
I will make the motion to deny this. I want to just say that I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this, both by Mr. Mueller and the team, and by the neighbors. But as has been said here, we represent the neighbors. And I don't believe the standards have been met. I think that this impacts property values and quality of life for the neighborhood. And if it's not approved and the repair facility is built, to me, less is more. You know, it's going to be a smaller facility, it's going to be a smaller footprint, it's going to be less impervious surface. It'll help with drainage and filtration of runoff. So I'd like to move to deny this using the language that has been suggested.
Based on the standards of the special use permit.
Second the motion.
Based on the language that was recommended by Corporation Counsel.
So this is a motion to deny.
Yes.
So an affirmative vote is to deny, just to be clear,
Second.
right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Do you want any-
Feel free to make a comment.
I do. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I know everyone's been here. And I've listened to this, and this is not easy. And I think what it comes down to is Councilperson Bloomberg talked about what is a permitted use and what the zoning code allows. And I think Councilmember Tapia, who I've had conversations with about those conditions of a special use, while I appreciate everything the Mueller team has done and the concessions and the dollars, I think it would be hypocritical of me to say there's nothing we can do as a council at this point to prevent a permitted use and then not hold the applicant to the same zoning code as it pertains to the standards that must be met for the special use. So I wanted to say that because I appreciate everybody's time here. I certainly appreciate the applicant's time through all these meetings. But if we're going to rely on the code, we can't be kind of pregnant. We have to hold it to the letter both ways. And now, thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I want to reiterate what I said before. I would not want this in my neighborhood, and I'm entirely sympathetic with what everybody's preferences and desires are. I also recognize genuine efforts by the applicant to the degree that he is capable of doing it to make some accommodations. And for the same reasons that Councilmember Stolberg has pointed out, I appreciate those efforts, and I feel the same way about this entire proposal. So it is an unfortunate situation. I think you recognize the opposition that has been presented by the neighborhood. At the same time, I understand why this presents an opportunity for your business, and your willingness to try to accommodate that to the extent that you can. It is not, in my opinion, adequate enough if it were in my neighborhood to be happy about it, but I recognize from sitting here what my limitations are as a representative of the people in this room and the representative of everybody in Highland Park.
Thank you. Corporation Counsel?
Yeah, Mayor?
Hang on one second.
And I just want to make a clarification. So Councilmember Stone indicated that the motion she made was using the language, as I stated, my language being that we would be directed as the Corporation Counsel to draft, I'm sorry, not findings of fact.
Resolution.
The resolution. That resolution would be on the next meeting.
But we
And
are.
so you would be voting to adopt
So the resolution to deny.
would be on the, on our next
On
meeting,
the
correct?
next meeting.
Yep. Your motion is to draft a resolution to deny.
Got it.
Yes,
Then we will
that is
vote
my
again
motion.
at our next meeting.
Correct.
Okay. October 24th, I believe. Yes, Councilmember Tapia.
Yeah, my sentiments are clear. I do want to thank Mr. Miller for what has really been, I think, a good faith effort to grow your business. And I'm, as a business leader, working with the biggest corporations in the world, I understand the need and the desirability for economies to have businesses like yours prosper. And I really believe the authenticity that you have demonstrated. I mean, you already have spent a lot of money through all the studies and all the changes, and you were have been ready to spend even more, and even want to give it yet another go, and I don't take that lightly. I think in today's world, with the big corporations and smaller, we're looking at a holistic view of business. It's not just the bottom line of the actual business of profit and loss, and it's the cost, and the cost is not just the cost of doing business, it's the cost to lifestyle, the cost to the environment, the cost to the well-being of a larger community, and businesses like yours are taking that into account, because the profit and loss is not just what's in the spreadsheet monetarily, but it's sort of the cost to the larger community. And given your neighborliness, which I believe as well, and how much you've given to our community and will continue to do it, I can feel that, with a room full of people or a neighborhood full of people that really don't want this here, I just don't see it being a healthy thing overall, not only for the neighbors, but even for all that you've invested relationally in the city and economically. And I'm hoping that whatever ends up happening, that, we can be part somehow of finding maybe an alternative that is necessary that will be a win-win. And you can continue to prosper and grow here, and I really sincerely mean that.
Thank you. I just want to thank the neighbors for your patience and for your diligence and for coming out, for advocating on behalf of your neighborhood. It is greatly appreciated by all of us. And with that, I'll ask the clerk to call the question, call the vote.
Councilmember Tapia?
You're voting yes if you're denying.
So make sure. Yes, I vote to deny.
Councilmember Stolberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Stone?
Aye.
Councilmember Bloomberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Holloman? Councilmember Littlewer?
Aye.
Mayor Rotering?
Aye. 6 ayes, no nays. We will be back in 2 weeks to take the final action on this resolution, and thank you all for coming out.
I think we need to
The
explain.
24th of October.
We need to
Just
explain.
say what happened. People are confused.
Okay.
Oh,
All right. We're going to take a 5-minute recess. Take a 5-minute recess.
Take a bite of food in that? No, don't do that. No.
Andres?
All right, so
Tony Bloomberg? Right, we will reconvene the city council meeting. We are considering item 4 of a Plan and Design Commission recommendation for a special use permit for a planned development 925 to 937 Deerfield Road. Do we need a presentation, or have people read the packet?
I've read the packet.
Are there any questions? Councilmember Stone.
I just want to disclose that I serve on the board of Community Partners for Affordable Housing as the representative from the city council.
Thank you very much. That's an ex officio position.
Can I ask a question? I did have.
Sure.
I just had a question. I don't know if anybody else wants a presentation, because it was very clear. It looks like it's a wonderful proposal. The only question I had to do with things that have been submitted to date. And I just wanted to know if the lighting plan, if the photo, if everything has been submitted that needs to be to move this forward, and if not, if they could just come back. Because I don't want to, while I think I love this idea, I don't want to treat them any differently from anybody else. And so if it's not yet finished, I don't think we should move to go forward with it.
I understand, but may I respond to that, Mayor?
Absolutely, thank you.
So, a couple of things. There are a couple of things that we're working on still, collectively, they're them providing us reviewing. So let me just start with the emergency access. We're working with the fire chief and them on that aspect of it. I think we've resolved that. We're going to fine tune that, and that will be back before you with an affirmative on those comments. At the time, we're hopeful that tonight you'll choose to direct direct draft approval documents. There is an important aspect of this regarding grants that are to be applied for and other funding sources that we do need to keep to a timeline in terms of that. And that is not a zoning consideration, that's more of a grant consideration. And this project did get a grant through the Housing Commission for this affordable
But
housing.
in order for the grants to go forward, you're saying you need to move this project along on this time. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is, I would advocate that the council consider, if it's so disposed to, direct Corporation Council to draft documents. Now, we've already asked that they do so, the applicant has, but it would be good to have the affirmative from City Council so that we could come back at the next meeting with those as opposed to doing this so presumptuously.
Can we do
Again,
it
following your direction,
contingent-
whichever way.
Can we do it contingent upon all of the things that do need to be submitted?
Absolutely, and that was
being
staff's
done?
intent, of
So
course.
as long
And
as
so
there's that contingency
that's
on
correct.
it, then I think.
Absolutely, and that's what we
Yeah.
recommended,
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. So that was one item. As terms of the photometric plan, I would
Right.
say the following. Given the number of lights and the types of lights used, we thought that that was unnecessary part of the application. However, there are some changes that councils may want to make to particular lights that they're proposing. And so I would ask that the council talk about that and say so, and then we'll make sure that that's, of course, done through a revision and through the docs that we're talking about.
Well, wouldn't you have to submit that, well, can we ask that that be part of the contingent of what you
Correct.
submit to us, so that we
That's
could,
correct.
at that point, review it?
Correct, because this would not be a final
So
vote.
then
This is
then we're
just
okay to
directing
go.
documents, yes.
Then it's fine to do a motion if you want.
Councilmember Stone, and then.
Yeah, I just want to ask that the motion include, I'm sure everyone will be surprised to hear that, I want to ask that the motion include that the lights be 3,000 Kelvin or less.
I thought we talked
And
about that at PDC, but we could double check and make sure it's in there.
I'm pretty sure that it's in there already, I just want to
Yep.
make sure that it is, and.
It is. But yes, I
okay.
think that's a good.
Yeah, and I understand there have been some supply chain issues regarding the lights that were specified, So that may need to be changed, but I assume that'll be finalized in the documents.
And the civil engineering plans, that's toward the end anyhow, isn't that correct?
What we would say, Madam Mayor, is that, yes, the final plan approval can't happen without final civil plans, and they're still working on those, but this is, again, just directing documents and getting whatever feedback for conditions in addition to any that are already recommended by staff and the PDC, and so that we can have those documents ready for you, and yes, you'll need to have those final plans as part of those documents, so you'll be able to see that that's in fact happened and that staff has reviewed those matters.
Okay.
Is that okay then, Nance, to move forward with them?
Absolutely.
So then I'd like to move that we direct staff to develop plans, but contingent upon all of a resolution.
Final documents.
For final documents, thank you. But contingent upon any documentation.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? We good? Okay.
nice development.
It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
It is, yeah.
Will the clerk call the vote, please?
Councilmember Tapia?
Aye.
Councilmember Stolberg?
Yes.
Councilmember Stone?
Aye.
Councilmember Bloomberg?
Aye.
Councilmember Holloman? Councilmember Littwer?
Aye.
Mayor Rotering?
Aye, 6 ayes, no nays. Item 4 is approved with those conditions. I am seeking a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. You wanted us to wait a couple of minutes before we go into...
Just like 30 seconds, just to make the video transition a little easier.
Sounds like... All right. Hang on.
I want to take one bite of this.
Don't anybody leave your seats.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Hopefully you were entertaining this evening.
They said we were entertaining.
I'm excited about this development.
It's nice.
You know, and it's an area where there was displacement. The potential displacement could have happened.
I have to
I
eat
agree.
some food.
I agree.
Or I'm going to pass out.
I know. Thanks. Is there food?
That was senior night.
We're good? So let's call to order the Committee of the Whole of the City Council of the City of Highland Park, Illinois, October 11th, 2022. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Tapia?
Present.
Councilmember Stolberg?
Here.
Councilmember Stone?
Here.
Councilmember Bloomberg?
Here.
Councilmember Holloman? Councilmember Littwer?
Here.
Mayor Rotering?
Here, we have a quorum. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole
I move to approve them as amended.
held September 27th?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the minutes are approved. We're going to be discussing the payment in lieu of affordable housing at our next meeting, so stay tuned for that. In terms of the budget workshop, we have beautiful presentations, I am sure, planned from the city manager's office, the finance department, the fire department, and community development. Curious to know if you all need to hear those presentations or if you've done your homework and read through the entire budget and
had a meeting with Gita and
had a
Julie.
meeting with the city manager and the finance director.
Who are wonderful and really, really in-depth.
Remember when
Yeah.
we used to have budget meetings weekly?
We used to have weekly budget meetings. But to that end, it sounds as though we can continue on with our Committee of the Whole and say thank you for a beautiful job drafting that budget. And for
Absolutely.
those who are interested in looking at it, it is available on the city website, currently the draft budget for fiscal year 2023, correct?
So after this evening, Mayor, we'll have the presentations from the departments posted to our website, so people will be able to review those.
Perfect, awesome, great.
That's correct,
The
yes.
draft is
Just
not.
the presentations that we've.
Okay. Gotcha, okay.
Then, Gita,
Yes.
your team was preparing a whole bunch of answers to some of the questions that came, right, via email?
Yes,
When will we see them?
we're still working on those, probably at the end of this week.
Okay. But in the meantime, stay tuned for a beautiful, balanced budget that looks good. All right, thank you. And so with that, it is simply a matter of closed session.
We have nothing for closed session this evening. We had it just as a placeholder, just in the event we had something, but there's nothing scheduled.
What
Okay.
about the approval of the minutes?
We can do that.
We can roll that over
Okay.
to another meeting. So I'm going to propose that we do that.
Okay.
And to that end, then we're just seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. You ordered dinner for us.
How did that happen?
They're leaving you now.
That's okay, please grab it, or you're...